This conference will now be recorded.
Don't whisper. We should be okay with the recorder.
All right, let's go ahead and get started since I'm a little bit late and everybody's here. If everybody would get their mics turned on so we have our records and stuff. Okay, let's get the meeting called to order here. Let's see, there's James. We have a quorum. Everyone's here. We need to take a look at the agenda. I do have a slight change. We have Brian Daniel here tonight to provide us with some information about something that we've been working on with the short-term rentals. I would like to add before case number, before the A, the first one, some time to have Brian present his information and answer any questions for us. Any other changes or suggestions for the agenda?
So will that become the new 4A?
Yeah, that would have to become 4A, yeah. Okay, if no other changes, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So move to second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we need to review the minutes from the July 20th meeting. Okay, does anyone see any need for corrections or changes? All right, if not, can I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved, seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, as always, we will take each case on the agenda. I will introduce it. Since we have a rather lengthy agenda tonight, I'll ask this time, in this case, that if Ligon will, after I introduce each case, if he'll just present any new information. We've been over a lot of these before, so we'll just try to speed it up a little bit since we do have a lot.
Are you going to do Brian real quick?
Yes, I'm going
Okay.
to do him first, yes.
Gotcha.
Following that, the Planning Commission will have any questions for Ligon. Afterward, if the applicant has any comments, they can be made, and the Planning Commission will ask questions perhaps of the applicant. And then we have time if there's any public comment for each case after we've considered that. All right, so first, Ryan, if you would maybe grab a mic and now, basically, we've been working on a short-term rental definition and something for the ordinances. And Brian has some information for us, I think, that we've been asking some earlier questions about with Ligon. So let's just let Brian tell us what he's got there.
Right, and just reviewing our transient occupancy tax ordinance, that we don't have a short-term rental definition.
Mhm.
However, we have a definition of what is subject to the taxation, which reads: the tax imposed hereunder shall not apply to rooms or spaces rented and continuously occupied by the same individuals or same group of individuals for 30 days or more in hotels, motels, boarding houses, travel campgrounds, and other facilities offering guest rooms or other spaces for occupancy. So that would include campgrounds,
Mhm.
that sort of, those type facilities. But again, we don't have a specific short-term rental definition.
That's one of the things we're working on.
Right. Again, I kind of came to answer any questions anybody may have, but didn't prepare any type of formal presentation.
Okay. Of course, the primary question, I guess, that started this was, what is the 30 days? Is that is there some state regulation that
I believe that's by state
does regulate
statute
that? Yeah.
that you could not go to 45 days or something.
Okay,
It's
so-
a state statute for 30 days.
So in our deliberations, when we're talking about short-term rentals, those which are subject to the occupancy tax, then that has to be less than 30 days.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Any other yes, Pete.
Brian, do you know how many of these exist in the county? Or how many you have on record that may exist in the county?
I did not bring a number count. I can certainly get that and get that to you. I'll get that number to you, and I can share it with Mr. Carpenter as well, so he can distribute, or Ligon, so that can be distributed.
Okay. Any other question for Brian about the?
Do you have a sense of how much money comes into the county through the transient occupancy tax?
Again, I wasn't prepared for any, I was looking more into the ordinance, so I didn't collect any numbers. I can get those numbers and get those to you.
That'd be helpful.
Yes, Faye.
Sometimes we hear from Tracy, our economic development person, a fairly large amount of money that comes into the county by way of tourists or whatever. Now, I know the food tax would be part of that amount, she might say. But would some of this money come that she would be touting as the county benefiting from, or do you know? I mean,
I
would be
I've heard
curious
some
to
of her
know.
numbers, but I've never,
Could we get a
cross-checked them
breakdown of
with our numbers to see, what's,
So in other words,
Yeah.
do you have a breakdown of what comes from food versus the
Yes.
transit So you could give us that just so we might.
correct.
I think she gets her numbers somewhat from the chamber,
Right.
state
I'd be
chamber.
happy to get, like the average reporting that we get for both meals and TOT,
Just
and then the total as well. Again, I was looking more into ordinance type stuff and was thinking that the questions were directed towards that. I didn't prepare with any numbers there. I will say it's tough keeping up with them. There is no central, there's a lot of legislation in Richmond, and there's just 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was some discussion between the Airbnb type organizations and local tax administration organizations. They haven't been real forthcoming as far as putting the ease of administration out there. There's some pushback from those host type online host organizations.
Brian, have you seen the short-term lodging unit definition that the Planning Commission has been discussing over the last 3 or 4 months?
I have not reviewed that.
That would be very helpful if you would review that, and if you have any comments on it, to let Steve know.
Overlegan.
Because it implicates your office.
At the
Yeah,
very
and I'm
least,
not even familiar. Not even familiar with what direction we're going in. I just kind of got asked to
Yeah.
come in here and answer some questions. So I'll be better prepared.
Yeah, that'd be
If we
very
get-
helpful.
Get a few questions together and get those to me.
Mhm.
I'll be happy to answer any of those.
Lincoln, can you get him a copy of the definition we've been
Yeah, sure.
talking about?
I mean, we talked about it, but I think at one time, oh, sweet.
At one time, a few months ago, we actually had the numbers. I don't want to guess, but we have looked at those numbers before in this. But yeah, I can definitely pass it along, and we'll talk about it. But if it's a short-term lodging meets that definition, if someone is doing less than 30 days, which that was the number I've always used. They're going to be required to pay commissioner revenue, regardless of what, policy. So yeah, we'll have a powwow about it. We're not far from each other in the office. So.
okay, basically, the bottom line is the transient occupancy tax returns revenue to the county, perhaps a substantial amount then. Yes. Which is-
I have another
Miss-
question.
Yes,
Now that
Faye.
now that we have our
Sorry,
captive
my
person
dogs.
here for a moment, just wondering how this operation works with, do you have to go out and seek this money? I mean, I know people are supposed to be turning it in. And so just part of what you have to do, like seek it out and also, or do they voluntarily give it?
Well, of course,
Yeah.
there's some of both. It is a challenge seeking out and making sure everybody is in compliance. Yes, some of it is ignorance on people just not knowing the rules and regulations, but it is required. to report that, you know, if you collect a fee for overnight lodging. Again, it's a challenge because it can pop up one day and then the next day they decide they no longer want to do it. And again, we don't have, there is no central company that there are a couple companies out there that will administer the TOT for you and it sends it into the treasurer's office. You know, there are a couple companies out there, but the larger ones have given some pushback there.
And one other question, we have the temporary lodging now, the one that we passed. This would be exempt from that because it'd be more than 30 days. Where we have the hardship and, you know, people coming in to live for a short period of time. That would not be part of this tax.
Correct. I'm not specifically familiar with that, but if they're paying a fee and staying for longer than 30 days, they would not be subject to the transit occupancy.
Do you maintain a list of
We do.
people or organizations that operate these short-term rental
We do.
facilities?
Mike?
It's not public information, so we wouldn't be able to
The,
divulge that. But
the,
we can give numbers in
one
aggregate.
one of the provisions of what the planning commission has been discussing is registration. And I would think that would be desirable for anyone offering that you keep a record of anybody offering short-term rentals.
Okay, Mike, did you have a question?
I did, but Faye, it was Faye's.
Faye's
first
question, okay.
But so just to be clear, so you basically rely on somebody to come to you. If somebody opens one up or opens up an Airbnb, you really have no idea if they're going to do it unless they come to you.
Well, we scour the internet
Okay.
periodically, and we visit all the same sites that everybody else does. And again, you know, we do try to help people with compliance first and foremost, and then if you know we are allowed to do statutory assessments and things of that nature if they do fail to comply. So again, you know, we try to. There are times where people just don't understand it or haven't taken the time to understand they're subject to the TOT tax.
Well,
And
if they
again,
have
we,
to
we
get,
work with them the best we can. However, there are times that doesn't work out. So,
if they have to get a building permit, you've got them right there.
potentially, but,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, even if they get a building permit, we're not going to know whether they're doing that as transient or
But it'll alert you to the fact that the building's going up there.
sure. I mean, absolutely, we know to assess the,
Something's happening.
right.
Okay, any other questions for Brian?
So it was part of the discussion earlier, if either they would get a building permit or be required to register with you. Would that be a burden on
We
them?
already have a registration that we ask people to, but there's no, I mean, the only requirement by ordinance or state code would be to report. You know, we can't penalize them. We don't have anything to penalize them if they fail to register. We have a new business registration form in our office. However, you know, if they chose not to register, there's no penalty there. If we do discover them, we can, you know, make statutory assessments on that end.
Okay, any other questions?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just looked up the budget that was for FY '23. Looks like the TOT transit occupancy tax 75,000, and the restaurant foods tax is budgeted at 500,000. So
And there should be two line items for the TOT that gets split. So there should be the 75,000, and I'm not sure what the title, how the other line items listed out. But one goes to tourism and the other.
okay.
Okay, any other question?
I think it's 2/3. 2/3 and 1/3. Do you recall, Jonathan?
I know it's a 2%, 3% split. It's a total of 5% added on.
Right, there you go.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Brian, and we'll look forward to getting the data that you passed through
I'll
Ligon
get
maybe.
that, and I'll feed that through Ligon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, moving on with the previously existing agenda. Case number SU-09-22-20, Kathleen and Marshall Jenkins. have
Mr.
applied-
Chairman, before we do that,
Yes.
did you want to approve the minutes?
We've already approved. the
Oh, did
minutes.
you approve the
Yes, we
minutes?
did.
Okay, I missed that, sorry.
Okay,
I second it.
we're old, but there's 9 of us, so we remember between us. Okay. The Jenkins have applied to subdivide an existing 277.7 acre A1 agriculture zone parcel. The subdivision would create 3 new parcels and 1 residue parcel. The new parcels would be 18 acres, 42.6 acres, 126.5 acres, and the residue parcel would be 90.4 acres. The subject parcel has not been subdivided in the previous 10 years, and future subdivision rights would be exhausted for a minimum of 10 years from the date of recordation. The subject parcel contains 2 single-family dwellings addressed as 1573 and 1361 James City Road, Riva, Virginia, and is identified on Madison County's tax map as 33-3. Okay, and Ligon, this is one that I don't think we have seen before, so do you have anything to add
Yeah,
to that?
one little thing, I know Mr. Snyder had asked about the drain field, there's the road on the drain field. There's actually a new survey that Mr. Jenkins just pointed out. This was dated 4/22, but the one I actually have in my office that's really big, actually, they moved that drain field over, so they won't be driving over it. So otherwise, you do have a VDOT letter and expect the health department to have their approval letter in any day now. So that'll be heard September 7th, of course.
Okay, does anyone have a question for Ligon? Okay, it looks pretty straightforward, basically. If there are no questions for Ligon, is the applicant present and wishes to address the planning commission?
Here, I can address anything that needs to be addressed.
Okay, yeah. Does the planning commission have any questions for the applicant?
This looks pretty straightforward. I
Yeah,
don't see any problem here.
okay. That's very unusual. I guess not. Thank you. Okay. Any public comment before we move on to the next one?
How's this going forward without an erosion control study?
Well, he will have to, for the road, first of all, the road is existing, but if he disturbs over 10,000 square feet up to come get an erosion sediment plan in the future, once they start construction of the road. And I suspect it'll, if it's at that acre, then it'll have to submit a stormwater plan, but I don't know if it's going to be at that acre.
Okay, but basically that's at a further stage in the process.
Right, exactly.
Any other public comment on this? All right, and of course, this is the initial time that we've seen this one, so we will be revisiting this if there are other questions. All right, thank you. Case number OA-09-22-21, amending the zoning ordinance, specifically adding an Article 8-2-11 listed as mini storage units, a use allowable by special use permit in the B1 or business zoning district. Further amending Article 20 definitions and adding an Article 20-120B listed as mini storage units. Mini storage units would be defined as follows: a structure or group of structures containing separate storage spaces of varying size, leased or rented as individual leases for the purpose of storing personal property and household goods. Mini storage units are also commonly known as self-storage units or moving or storage facilities. Okay, and again, Ligon, this is something that we've kind of looked at. Can you, anything new or anything you want to add?
No, I think the ad kind of speaks for itself. I think it's, like I said, we're adding it as a special use, for we're not, we never really understood if the M1 storage facility really meant many storage units or not. So I think this clears that up, and it'll be a special use. So I think, like I said, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, any questions for Ligon from?
Yeah,
Planning Commission.
just one small nit, Lakin, why do you need the words of varying sized?
I'd probably just borrow the definition from a local other community. Maybe that's what they had in it.
I would suggest you take that out. Just
Okay, I mean, when we get to the hearing, if you want to strike that as a recommendation, we can. That obviously won't change the intent or the ordinance, but that's fine.
Is it possible we may want to, since these are mini units, we may want to put in something about the maximum size? I mean, because we
Well-
obviously don't want a 10,000 square foot mini storage.
Right. Well, let's remember also that it would have to be a special use permit.
Yeah.
So they'll probably give us a chance to get a look at if it was something we felt was too big or.
All right, any
And
other,
in that regard, the law of physics eventually comes into play. So.
no more than
something to
2,000
consider.
stories tall, right?
Right, yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
I know I kind of made some opposition to you, Ligon, on this a little bit, but I mean, I'm not opposed to it particularly, but it just seems like if you look at the B1 uses, most of them, and there's some that don't, but most of them kind of fall into more of like a retail sort of use. And if I were to purchase a lot on 29, in the thoughts that there'd be future development, and I built a retail type location and then kind of had non-retail uses, basically other uses that wouldn't draw people in to do a variety of retail things, I would, that would not be a benefit, certainly. Like I said, there are other uses, some by right and some special use that aren't particularly retail, but it just seems like it would be weird to have a retail space kind of chopped up from other retail spaces by a mini storage.
Yeah, I mean, many
facility.
storage units aren't, they're not going to win any architecture awards. But I think, again, we've had a lot of inquiries. I think because the county has 29, it's centrally located. We surely can keep going down the road of doing rezonings to M1 and maybe limiting the conditions to just mini storage units. But I think most business zones have mini storage units. Kind of, again, zoning ordinances do vary from community to community, but I think you'll find most, and most of them do it by special use permit. So I think as long as it's a special use permit, we're pretty safe that we could evaluate each one. If you think maybe it's a location that maybe could be a better retail or be used better, then I'm sure it might be grounds not to approve something. But I don't think we're going to see a rush of mini storage applications because we put this in here personally. So.
Any other question for Ligon?
Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
So if somebody wanted to use one of these for storage for a business, is that going to be covered? I mean, that's okay to do, right? Because I've known people that have had a business and stored stuff. Is that going to be okay for them to do that? Because we listed it as personal property and household goods. Is that okay or not?
Well, I mean, this is, so your traditional mini storage, separate buildings with access, an office. Yeah. I mean, could someone use an existing building, convert it into one or something like that? I mean, it's possible. But if they're renting spaces out where people come to and from to put their personal goods, whatever it may be, then that to me is a mini storage unit. We need a special use permit. If that answers the question.
I think maybe what Mike was getting at was subsequent to the development of this, if an individual leases a storage unit for business storage as opposed to personal property.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't make a big, if it was business, if a business was using it to store equipment or something, I mean,
Not necessarily, because it'd have to be maintained inside.
right,
I would assume.
right.
You could solve this problem very easily, Ligon, by taking out the word personal. Just say property, storing
That's what brought
property.
my attention.
Mhm.
Right.
And actually household goods.
Yeah, I would support Mike's
Okay, well,
comment in that.
yeah, I think striking that, and I haven't advertised it, has to go out Friday. We could strike both those things, varying sizes and personal.
Okay. Any other question for Ligon on this? Okay, since there's not an applicant for this, is there any public comment on this? All right, I guess we can move on to the next one then. All right, these are in preparation for public hearings. The first one is Homes by Yoder Construction LLC has applied to subdivide an existing 8-acre R1 limited residential zoned parcel. The subdivision would create 2 new parcels and 1 residue parcel. The new parcels would be 2.2 acres and 2.4 acres, and the residue parcel would be 3.3 acres. The subject parcel has not been subdivided in the previous 10 years, and future subdivision rights of said parcels would be exhausted. The subject 8-acre parcel does not contain a postal address, but is located on Burnt Tree Way, Route 685, Orange, Virginia. The parcel is identified on Madison County's tax map as 58-71. And that Orange, Virginia address is an oddity of where it's located
That's
in the
right.
county. Okay. Any comment on this one, Ligon?
What does that mean?
It's down within about what? Burnt Tree is probably less than 5 miles from the county line, and the mail probably is coming from Orange instead of Madison.
The post office does not respect county lines. I live in Orange, Virginia, according to the post office.
Yeah.
There are properties in Orange County that have Culpeper addresses, and likewise, there are properties in Greene County that have Madison addresses. It's just the vagaries of the Postal Service.
Yeah, he already has the VDOT approval. I'm gonna get that letter. And Health Department has everything and are gonna go out and look at his drain fields, but it is R1, so it's minimum 1.5 acres. So again, by right and everything will definitely be in order before October 5th. This would move forward October 5th.
What are the access roads? Where are the access roads?
So it comes off of Burnt Tree Way.
Yeah, but the 2 parcels that are further away, where
Right.
Let me look at,
Is there, I know at Burnt Tree,
I think
there
the
is a road.
properties are off 231, aren't they?
It's the.
Well, Burnt Tree is old 231. It
Yeah,
curves
so
through
there's
there.
Burnt Tree, there's 2 access points. If you're familiar with the livestock market on 230, it dumps out on that side where it intersects with Booton's Lane. This parcel is on the other side of Burnt Tree that just pulls directly off Route 230, I think just past Wright Lane, if I remember correctly. So it's on that end. I believe this property, there's a solar area near that. Small residential site, but that's on the side that's furthest away from Booton's Lane, if that helps any of you.
Yeah, well, I think your question is still valid, though. Those 2 back lots have to have access somewhere. Is it?
okay, so the back lots that you just come off Burnt Tree and there's just a shared driveway that all 3 lots would utilize.
Okay, it's running right along the
Yeah,
property
it's right
line?
around, yeah, and he's actually
okay.
putting together a maintenance agreement on it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's right there on the property, 50-foot right away. You see?
Okay, yeah,
How
it's,
does that get to the other right?
I mean, all three would be served by that same driveway.
yeah, it's running right on the property line there, it looks like. Again, this is,
It doesn't show it.
yeah, it's, I can, yeah, you can see the dotted lines there, but there's too many dotted lines. Yeah,
Is the utility easement?
yeah, right along there. Once again, we actually,
Building in. Yeah.
I think we need to ask for larger print again. Okay.
Yeah, I'll put it on 11 by 17
There
for
you
the
go.
hearing.
Yeah. You have to remember your audience, Ligon.
Can we, Mr. Chairman, point of privilege?
Yes.
Alan, is there a way to show the, below that graphic, where it shows the right of way is more of like a plat? Yes, yes, enlarge that plat looking section. So the question was, how does it, the easement to the back of the back parcels, is that the question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So what I'm saying is a 50-foot easement. It's easy to see at that first parcel, but it looks like I see arrows on the back two parcels that the boundary line for the back two parcels is actually, it looks like it's center line of that 50-foot right of way. So it looks like that 50-foot right of way comes right in, or excuse me, yeah, 50-foot right of way comes right in the center of those two parcels.
Right there.
Yeah.
So that upper parcel actually is not shown touching that 50-foot right of way.
It would not need it.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand the plat, you see the right of way, but the property line would probably be on the other side of the hash mark. And the reason I believe that's the case is because that, what I'm going to call the longer hash mark, says that it's a setback line, making me think that the line immediately below that is in fact the property line. And if that is in fact the case, then the 3.39 acre parcel is in fact touching the right of way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's a little unusual for us to see that particular way of drawing the plat, I think, though. Okay.
So is that 15-foot utility easement in the 50-foot right of way?
Yeah, yeah, it looks to be so. I mean,
Typically they are.
yeah, I mean, look, it's 50 foot. It goes down one property line, then kind of follows the back two parcels. It kind of, the property line sort of splits it in the middle. So it's just a 50-foot access easement. That'll be the driveway.
So you could have the utility easement in the right of way?
And in fact, most subdivisions do them that way. And the reason they do them that way is to make sure that all of the road disturbance is in one area. So if you look at anything that was done in Spotsylvania County in the 90s and early 2000s, which is the last time I've been familiar with those, you'll see that there is the 50-foot easement, and contained within that is the utility easement and the access easements and the drainage easements whenever possible. Drainage easements are a little different because the topography really dictates where those are.
Okay, any other question on this? So when we do see this next league, and I guess what we're asking is larger print and, just to ease our minds a little bit about those easements and the access and maybe the actual property lines.
Setback line.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We'll capture that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other question for Ligon on this? Okay, moving along then. Again, we have a more well, something that we have introduced already, so this is not unfamiliar to us.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to seek public comment on
Oh,
the Homes by
yeah,
Yoder
you're right,
construction?
yes. Any
Okay, I got one
public,
right.
since we actually have public here tonight, any public comment on this last one we talked about? The subdivision? Okay, they may be here for something else. Thank you. Yes. Okay. B here, this is Mr. Juan Pablo Leon. Am I pronouncing that close to right? Okay. Leon's a good Madison name there. Yeah. Has applied to rezone a roughly 0.75 acre portion of a 3.75 acre parcel from A1 agriculture to B1 business. If rezoned, the applicant would subsequently subdivide the roughly 0.75 acre B1 zoned area, creating a separate parcel. The residual 3 acres would remain zoned A1. The proposed B1 zone parcel would be utilized for an automotive sales lot, and the parcel's 2 existing dwellings would be converted into 5 250 square foot offices with up to 5 individual vehicle dealers operating from these offices. Each dealer would have no more than 10 vehicles on the site per dealer, for a maximum of 50 vehicles on the parcel at any given time. All the vehicles would be contained or parked in an enclosed or fenced-in area with a visual barrier. The subject parcel's 2 existing dwellings are addressed as 553 Kirtley Road and 101 James City Road, Riva, Virginia. The parcel is identified on Madison County's tax map as 33-11. And Ligon, this is a slight variation from what we saw the first time. So
That's correct. So a little bit of, after we met last workshop, a little bit of different thought on how this could potentially be achieved, and talked to Mr. Leone, and he liked the idea of sort of isolating that area. The 0.75 acres is 3.75 acres is what the public record says. So he could divide off, say, 75 acres, not, 3/4 of an acre would have enough space for the storage area that would be fenced in. Those 2 existing dwellings converted into offices, potentially as part of, any kind of proffer we talked through, maybe recommend, a minimal signage, but a fenced in area that would be enclosed. So really, I think it visually probably, would be very minimal from the road, and then the balance of the property would stay A1. If this sounds like a good idea, which, personally think it could work, then he would engage a surveyor, whether or not he would have that survey done. But I think we could make a condition of the rezoning is that, if this 0.75 acres is rezoned to B1, then you will then subsequently bring in and subdivide off that portion. Again, he might be able to have it done before then. So that's sort of the logic. And I know we talked about it and learned about it, and I think we had a good conversation last time. So that's just an idea of how to move this in this direction.
Okay, any questions for Ligon on this? Faye, did you?
Well, I don't know that it's for Ligon.
Well,
Well,
we'll start with that.
The way we're labeling this, which I understand from the last meeting we had, was that the state is requiring you to say it sounds like there are going to be a bunch of cars there all the time, maybe. I mean, that's our vision, our ignorant vision of a car dealership or a car repair place. But the way you described your business is that the state requires that you have set aside space for this, and you'll be having these other dealers who could potentially bring vehicles there. But basically, your business is online, and the repair and all is conducted in Manassas, I believe. But I think it would be great, because we don't need to be causing some
True.
concern when we're not talking about a bunch of cars there.
Right, this is a non-traditional auto
Very
dealership. shall we say.
non-traditional,
Yes.
but the coming thing, I would say.
Good evening, Commission and neighbors. Thank you for your time.
And yes, ma'am, the traditional sense of a dealership would have us imagine that it'd be loaded with vehicles. In this case of our business plan and the way that we've been conducting business since 2015 is more of a satellite office. And it is very scarce the times that we would have any vehicles online. It's more of a matchmaking service of interested buyers and vehicles that are available at auction. The vehicles are purchased and sent directly to the repair shops. So no vehicles are actually brought to the dealership themselves. They're taken to a repair shop. The client is able to visit the vehicle personally at these shops, or we're able to do a video call after the vehicles are repaired. Then they are then delivered to the clients, causing less overhead costs and causing or giving more savings to the clients. And so the amount of space shown here is maximum of 50 vehicles. It is due to the requirement to be in compliance with the Virginia Motor Vehicle Dealer Board for us to be able to have definitely an office space where we're able to originate and conduct our business in writing, but then also having a place designated for vehicles if vehicles were to be brought in, which would not be this case.
Right.
And yet, yes.
I guess I got a couple questions. The other 5 dealers that you're speaking of, will they be working for you or will they be independent dealers?
They will have their own independent dealer license. So I will be one of the dealers in the offices. So there'll be other 4 dealers.
So am I correct or not? Maybe I'm not. That if you have 5 dealers there, you have to have 5 offices and 5 addresses and 5 doors, because each dealer by law has to have a dealer license and a dealer office. Is that correct?
Every dealer does have to have their own dealer office and their own doors. And what's awesome and great as far as this property goes, we have 4 independent doors for those dealers in the building. So every dealer will have its own entrance and will have its own suite number. It'll be 553 currently A and 553 currently B. And so we will be in compliance in order for every independent dealer to have their own dealer license. Yes, sir.
And when you were here before, we talked about buy here, pay here. Is that still an option, or are we not going to be a buy here, pay here?
I looked more into it. Thank you for bringing that up. Last time I looked far more into it. And so it will not be a case of buy here, pay here. And typically the other business owners, as it were, or the other tenants, the official term would be other tenants renting space in order to obtain their dealer licenses. If they were to do a financing of sorts, it'd be more so with subprime lenders like Westlake or even other prime lenders, either buyer supply financing, where then the dealers themselves would not need to repossess the vehicles. Those would be solely the jobs of the financing companies, and then they have their own storage units.
Quick question. Are we're assuming, I guess, that the other 4 dealers are following the same business plan?
Correct.
Okay, so, and I'm wondering how we can kind of make sure of that.
Sure. Well, as far as our plan as well as landlords, it'd be to give our tenants a facility in order for them to be able to obtain their dealer license. But then also we want to be able to maintain our type of property the way we envisioned it. And so in our lease, there will be a stipulation that they will have assigned to them the office as well as the spaces, but it is not expected of them to actually bring the vehicles here as far as obtaining or occupying space on the actual parking spaces, because then that would require more maintenance on our part as landlords, more surveillance, because now there's vehicles that someone can come in and do stuff to, but we would write that into the lease agreement.
Good. So the lease is actually controlling that then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have a contract in place with these other dealers?
Not yet, but we do have expressed interest and they're ready to move forward. With,
Steve's question, I thought, was a good one. How do you control their activities? And your answer was you do it by contract. And I think that's the right answer. I'm just wondering if it would be helpful from the county's standpoint and your standpoint if someone like the county attorney were to review that contract. I don't know what his reaction would be to that.
I'm assuming by contract you mean lease.
Pardon?
You mean by contract, you mean lease. Is that right?
Yeah,
A lease contract, a rental
Yeah,
contract?
that's what I meant.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to take a look at that, but
No. The other question I had, we went into a good deal of detail the last time
Yes.
about your business plan, which is very interesting. But how are the adjoining properties used currently?
as far as our neighbors,
Your neighbors?
okay. So to, let's see if we could look at the, I want to address it correctly as far as north or south, but just on the other side of our property, one of them has a lot that has a warehouse space. Right here. So I just pointed here and then, I don't know if the picture can be put on the board. But right above here, above our property, our neighbor has a type of warehouse space that he
Okay.
just holds his.
So they're not going to be, your use of the property isn't going to be that much different from their use of the
Oh,
property.
correct.
Yeah.
Actually, they're gonna have more vehicles on there than we because they already have
Yeah.
their race cars.
What about the rest of them?
So our neighbor here, he is a resident, so he has his home on this
Okay.
side, just on this side, and then on here is field crops, like a cornfield, just across the street.
Okay.
Here. And then here on the bottom, across Kirtley, there is a single family home, and then there's empty land here. And then down the street is the former hotel. There used to be like a motel, sorry, not hotel, a motel, and then Prince Wineries.
Right.
Has anybody raised any objection to your plan? Any of the neighbors?
Not that I've heard or that have come to me.
Ligon, if you
well,
were-
letters, this is scheduled for October, so I'll send the letters out before next workshop.
Okay, okay.
And
That would be my only concern, that,
Oh,
but
Well, and I will
we'll
say,
get that
the
data.
the only thing I'll say is we have a set of conditions which we'll bring back at the next proposed conditions, we'll bring back at the next
Okay.
workshop. They'll have to follow that,
Okay.
regardless of what his lease says or if it doesn't say. No, I'm just envisioning fenced in area, visual barrier, no more than 50 cars. I mean, that's simple as that, no more
Okay.
than 5
I don't have
offices.
any other questions. Thank you very much, Leo, Mr. Leo.
Yeah, to Peter's point, real quickly though, very often we encourage that you do make contact with your neighbors and just verify that they do in fact are not objecting to what you're doing. It sounds like probably they wouldn't, but still that's a useful thing to do before you come to the public hearing.
Yes, sir. Definitely. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Mike.
So, being you've sliced off like 0.75 acres on this, where's the septic field?
The drain field would be right here on this side.
So it's on the other lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just make yourself, I mean, if it's a new parcel, just kind of create an easement for repair. I mean, he's going to own the other parcel. So he could make some sort of an easement that he can repair, replace. I mean, it's not that uncommon. So I think that's kind of easy to solve.
It would still have to be recorded though.
Yeah, I would recommend that, with the new subdivision, that it also be recorded with it, that, they have the right. Again, he owns it, so I think he'll let him self-maintain it. But if for some reason down the road it was sold, they would still have the right to repair, replace that septic system.
But that's
Yeah.
why it would need to be recorded. So if anybody ever did a title search, they would know that there's an easement on that piece of property.
Yeah, we'll make that part of, we can definitely make that a condition as part of the rezoning.
Yeah, because to follow up on what Pete just said, I know from a neighbor's personal experience that if part of that land is then resold later for any reason with a septic system on the other land, that can create potential problems.
Yeah, it's kind of like a driveway almost, that you shared use, that, hey, I can use this for this specific purpose. So it's, I think we just need to probably make that real clear. And that's a good point. I would have gotten around to asking him, but I assumed that probably one of the septic fields was not going to be on that.
Mhm.
Or
So it will have to be in any subsequent plat, and so it's clear for any future. Yeah. Any other questions? Faye, yes.
I just have a statement that I'm going to make for me, and looking forward, as I keep saying, we're going to have to look with change and whatever. I hope that when we do things like consider the rezoning for this particular business, which is not something we're aware of, all very ignorant when we started out, and that's why I wanted to make sure, 'cause I've already heard rumblings, all these cars, and I'm putting out the fires in my own little world, but we need to make sure that we get the public aware of what's going to be there. And I also want to say with real strong conviction that if he's the owner and he's got the plan and he's putting up the money, he's going to be running the place and we trust him to do it. That's the bottom line. And I don't know that we need to be meddling if that's to assure it. He needs to be respected for what he can do and what he knows and what he's already proven he can do. That's just my opinion, but I do feel very strongly about that.
Any other question for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I got one question.
Sir.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
would you've proposed a fenced / screened in area to house any cars that could be there. So obviously up to 50 could be there. So could you confirm that that fenced in area will hold 50 automobiles? I understand your business model, and I asked you last time you presented, if I drove by there, what would I see? And you said exactly what you're seeing today. Nevertheless.
Yes, sir. And so looking at the new proposed here and speaking with Mr. Webb, where before it was the entire B1, and sort of to put our neighbors' mind at ease as well as the commission, was to limit the amount of space allowed for this business. And so keeping just round nice numbers of 0.75 and enough space to be able to hold the 5 offices as well as the parking spaces. I bring that up because in the original draft or rough drawing that I presented, the fenced-in area was going to be here, just here. And we have to see as far as the survey, and also if the commission would mind for me to put in a fence on this side, which should be able to house possibly 50 cars, but we'd have to measure it out. And this would be for the being in compliance with the salvage requirement of 600 square feet. But yes, we would certainly have a fenced-in area, and any vehicles, if they were going to be, say, left overnight versus one of the business owners or independent dealers driving their own personal vehicle, any vehicle that would be left there overnight, for example, would be certainly left in the fenced-in area. But the idea is to preserve the current aesthetics and natural look of the property. So fencing in maybe the entire area here might not look so nice. I don't know if I understood you correctly as far as fencing this whole area.
No, sir. I don't want to see you fence in any more than you have to, but I want to see you fence in enough that would hold a maximum of 50 cars.
Yeah, I think we'll probably need, just doing a 200 square foot for parking space. I think you're probably going to need about 15,000 square feet. 10,000 for you do 50 times 200. So that's a standard parking space. So you put a little extra for your travel lanes, get in and out. So I think 15,000. So I really think on the back end there, and it's pretty flat parcel, you could find a spot because at 0.75 acres is going to be about 30 some thousand square feet. So should be able to find a spot there where you can do 15,000 square foot fence in. And we'll go measure it out.
Yeah, I would appreciate it.
And Mr. Leon, where would you and your fellow dealers and your customers park?
Sure. So we've looked into different forms of having on the grass sort of parking. There's different sort of pavers or type of material we could put onto the ground. So it keeps the grass there, but then when they come in and park, because it's not going to be readily used, it will not cause lawn disturbance. So there's currently a trail or a road of sorts that goes from the entrance here and it curves out right here. And all of this is drivable space. And so the idea is I'm going to occupy this space here. This office is going to be mine. Over here is going to be the 4 other dealers. And so whenever I meet with a client over here, it's already has sort of peat gravel here. And so clients are able to park here where it used to be, I don't know if it's a old wives' tale, so to speak, the old post office of Leon. But there is parking here on this side. And then we're planning to put markers here for parking because we do not expect an overflow of clients occupying the space all at one time. So there should be enough parking for visitors here or visitors or customers here or right in front, right here.
Okay.
Yes, Pete.
Steve, one of the reasons I'm thinking that you got to have enough for 50 cars, the state code requires to have so many parking spots for each dealer that you have there, correct?
Yes, correct. The 10 parking spaces per dealer.
Any other question? I have a quick question. It might be just kind of picky. The area that you're showing outlined here, and I may be misreading the drawing, but it looks like the property line maybe goes to the center line of James City Road. Is that correct? And there's a little rectangle there that's not included in your shaded area. I just want to make sure that there's not a little piece in there that's not accounted for. Right on the right, the right-hand side where,
On the right-hand side?
yeah,
right there?
I assume the orange line is the center line of James City Road. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's, the property includes, if I'm reading this right, that little kind of trapezoid there to the right of your red line.
I believe
Right,
it
right in there,
goes
yes, right in
partly
there.
Into the road.
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah. Now, I realize that part of that is paved, but that is part of your property, if I understand the way this is drawn correctly. I mean, it's not unusual for property lines to go to the center lines of these old roads. So,
Yeah, that actually little triangle is I talked to Brian Daniel about it, and I haven't sent this to the VDOT yet, so I'm going to send that through here next week or so. I believe that's actually owned by VDOT. That's what he says normally. These type of little triangles are VDOT.
all right, so that's from the center line to what, 30 feet or?
Right. I mean, we'll really have to look at a survey.
Yeah.
And I'll see what surveys on file and get that. That'll be useful.
Yeah.
I think the property line most likely stops at pretty much, at the edge of pavement. We'll get a
Yeah, I
survey.
mean,
for next.
the highway department has that right of way easement there, I just want to be sure we don't have a situation where we've got this little 5-foot sliver of land that you're paying taxes on and you're not including in your D1 parcel there.
Yes, sir. So we'll make it a point to have the survey done as soon
Yeah.
as possible. We connect with Mr. Webb and get a move on getting the survey done.
Yeah, it's not unusual in Madison where VDOT's been involved and they've changed road beds or something to have these little pieces of land that nobody knows. I think Faye knows about that too. So I just something to look at.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Pete.
I want to ask Sean a question. Sean, if that's a state road or state right of way right there, is there a setback limit from that state road that he would have to follow to be able to install anything or do anything?
Sitting here, I don't know the answer, but my guess is that there probably is. I mean, that's typically, what would be required. And of course, we've got our own setbacks, pertaining to anybody who's on a road.
Does the fact that these are existing buildings, does that affect that?
So long as you're not expanding a non-conforming use, you're probably okay.
Okay, any other question for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I guess I got one more question. Mr. Leon, so why would you not rezone the entire parcel B1?
Yes, sir. It's to give a peace of mind to the commission as well as our neighbors that we will not be filling up the entire other 3 acres with offices and parking spaces, and now all of a sudden something that we did not speak to or promise. We look to do proper testimony and do what we say. And that's how I was raised, and that's how we will continue.
Okay, that's a good answer. So obviously, acreage that's under 3 in ag and A1 would be a non-conforming lot, so we can't do it less than that. But I would suggest, just for the record, that if you find that the space in 0.75 acres will not accommodate 50 acres, maybe you could rezone the other part into R1, which, residential, which would meet your purposes as far as neighborly, and it would fit then. Just throwing that out.
Yes, sir. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, any other question? Okay, in that case, thank you, sir. Do we have any comments from the public on this proposal? It looks like everybody's here for something else. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Leo. All right, moving on to item C. Kriglersville Elementary School LLC has applied to rezone 5.83 acres from A1 agriculture to M1C limited industrial with conditions as allowed by right per Articles 9-1-20 and 9-1-36 in the M1 zoning district. The applicant is seeking to utilize the parcel's existing buildings, the former Kriglersville School and the former voting precinct building, for a mixture of short-term lodging units, a restaurant/bar, an event/venue space, and retail space. In addition, the applicant is seeking to construct new short-term lodging units, cabins, on the property. The total number of new short-term lodging units would not exceed 11 total units, and these lodging units would be a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom units, with 1 unit potentially containing up to 8 bedrooms. The former Kriglersville school structure has roughly 15,000 square feet of interior area and is proposed to contain up to 20 short-term lodging units. And the former voting precinct building has roughly 2,300 square feet of interior area and is proposed to be utilized for retail space. If rezoned to M1 prior to the sale of the 5.83 acre parcel to Kriglersville Elementary School LLC, Madison County's Board of Supervisors would administratively subdivide a roughly unknown number of acre portion of the subject parcel as a standalone parcel under county ownership for continued use as the location of the Criglersville Mountain Museum. The parcel's postal address of 1120 Old Blue Ridge Turnpike, Madison, Virginia, and is identified on Madison County's tax map as 21-61. Okay, and Ligon, there are a few minor changes here, I think. Would you?
Sure. So the first thing is we're looking to move this to October 5th.
Mhm.
So it'll be a busy night for my birthday. So, anyway, so that's the first thing. So it gives us a little more time to sort of go, you know, I think we're in good shape as far as the big thing is you do have a conceptual site plan that was completed. And you have that. And what I have worked on in the last week was when we came up with the idea of the number. We looked at the ordinance and we're in agreement that based on the different uses, we have roughly 91 parking spaces. So I think that's something that we're in agreement with as far as the code. I think there's a lot of parking spaces, but I was looking at some literature from wedding planners, and they sort of give a number per guest, number of guests at a wedding, and sort of if you had 300 people, that number is, I think, generally a good number. I think you probably, and it looks like the way the parking is arranged, we can actually down that property line could potentially get even more cars than the 90. Which is, I think, good to have on site. Not a lot of options off site. I guess the church would have, if there was an agreement there, but I think as many as you can get on site, the better. But what I've done is to go through my memo on conditions, and I worked on this for several days, and I sort of modeled it off. I thought the conditions for the Crest Array a couple of years ago were pretty good. So I sort of modeled it off that, but obviously these projects are different, but you will also see that Mr. Shapiro and his legal counsel have gone through and looked at it and made some adjustments, and that's this sheet that I passed it out. Basically, they have done a good job of giving each proposed condition a proper sort of heading. There's a few small changes and semantics that I think are fine. A few things that need to be clarified between now and say our next workshop in September. And if there's anything that needs to be added, I mean, I'm all ears. I think the applicants are too. I think if you look at the memo on potential conditions, I try to spell out a lot of these things are things that, when it comes to site plan and building permits, those things that you have to do, but I always think that it's good to sort of retell these things in very clear language. One of the conditions, you have to be kind of creative with your language, but a lot of this revolves around the septic and what can be provided on site. You can see one of the conditions that says there will be no discharge to any of the waterways. So depending on what comes back from that evaluation, which I understand is going to happen on the 22nd of August, the project would, depending on what can be accommodated with the soils, the project could shrink. I mean, you could lose some cabins, you could lose some occupancy, you might lose some square, and so I wanted to write a condition that sort of says that this is what's being presented, but we also realize if for some reason you cannot, you don't have that capacity for sewer, then you're going to have to obviously reduce the scope of the proposal. Reducing is usually better than expanding. I mean, so if we're reducing, we're within the limits of what would be approved during the rezoning. Other than that, site plan conditions, are there any questions? I'm sure there are on the conditions. I do think what has been proposed by Mr. Shapiro, sort of improvements, some changes to what I have written, even though I think they're substantially very similar. That's kind of what I think tonight we can kind of pick over and talk about. And you will notice we did have a couple additional things that were thought of as a landscaping plan, a lighting plan, because again, those were issues in the past. So I thought adding those as sort of something to also include with a future site plan. We have those discussions. But if you look at the conceptual site plan, I think that's a pretty, pretty good idea of, I still like to see, before we come back in September, a size for the cabins, a maximum size. There's a few things as we still need to sort of get some details on.
Okay, so a large amount of these actual details are going to be dependent on your soil scientist report and your hydrologist report. Any questions?
I have a couple of things.
Yes.
Yeah, two things in particular. One, at our last workshop, Jonathan, I think you undertook to provide copies of the contract. I specifically asked for it, as you'll recall. And I saw excerpts from it at the Board of Supervisors meeting on the 9th, but I'd like that before I get too deeply into this and responding to the conditions. I'd like to see the contract. And then secondly, and in that connection, and I think it would probably be helpful if we were to have some mutual understanding of when you would like comments from the commission on your proposed conditions. So you and Mr. Shapiro aren't off on your own in negotiating them, and we haven't gotten comments on them yet. Could we establish some schedule for commissioners to react to the conditions?
Well, you're welcome to react now. You're welcome to, if you have any, any comments now, but the goal is by the September 21st meeting is to have the final. I mean, I just got their comments came back Monday, this week, I guess it was. Right. So that's why I just handed them out. But I do think they're plus or minus a few things are pretty much what I have written is they're substantially the same document. So I'll take this. If there's anything that you think needs to be added to this, if it's been, I've just left out. These were just things that, again, I sort of used a model from a couple years ago for the special use permit that we had a few years ago. So I use that as a model. If there's anything that you think is just glaring that we need to cover, then that's the time. But definitely by the 21st, the 3rd, we would have a final.
Yeah, and in fairness to Mr. Shapiro, I would think that you would want comments from the commission as soon as possible.
Yeah, because again, it's October 5th.
Can we set up some kind of an understood schedule as to when our deadline for getting comments on what you've got here is?
So the final, it will be ready. I think we'll have everything finalized before definitely by September 21st. So September 21st would be, these are the agreed to conditions.
You're not getting my point, Lick.
No, I'm not.
My point is that you've written up a set of proposed conditions. I gather Mr. Shapiro has responded to some of them. Before you get much deeper into that process, I would think that it would be helpful for both of you to get comments from the Planning Commission.
That's what I hope it was going to happen.
And the way to be fair to Mr. Shapiro would be to set a deadline for the commissioners to respond to what has been written so far, I would think.
Hopefully in the terms of efficiency to be prior to the September workshop, so that when we get to that, we have a working model.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay, that doable?
But you are welcome to look at them tonight. And
Yeah,
these have been in the packet. So if there's anything that, that stands out, that's kind of where I'm getting at is, it's been online for the last 5-6 days. So, we're welcome to kind of work through them tonight as well.
Steve,
Yes.
my concern with that is until Mr. Superior has some kind of work from his soils person, a lot of the questions that I might want to ask, I wouldn't know what to ask without knowing what his results is.
What kind of data are we looking at for the soil tests and so forth?
So
Yeah, we might as well go ahead. Yeah. The applicant.
great to be with y'all again. So the soil test, weather permitting, is supposed to occur on, I think, August 22nd. That's a Monday of next week. I recognizing this was likely to be a line of inquiry, asked how long it would take to get the results of that soil test. They seem to think that in walking the site on Monday, they're going to be able to verbally convey to me a good deal of the information I need to plan. Now, certainly that's not going to be, the specific perk rates of various soil samples, but I don't even know if I had those perk rates, I would be able to answer the questions that you're going to have about them.
Right. Well, but at the same time, it's hard for me to turn in my questions to Ligon when I don't know what my questions don't be until I see the results of what's going to happen.
So I think that as Ligon said, this represents sort of our greatest ideal for the plan. Though there certainly may be reductions that are needed in order to accommodate the soil science, I think this sets sort of, if you'll pardon the pun, a high watermark.
Stay away from that.
So, I mean, I guess I hate to use the term worse, but I can answer questions based off sort of the maximal allowance that the soil
I understand.
have. But yeah, I don't know if that gets an answer.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry, another point of privilege. So I hear Mr. Work's concerns. I hear questions from Mr. Elliott. So if I'm looking at the calendar now, so you have conditions to consider here tonight, but you also will have another workshop in September before the joint meeting in October, assuming that's what we're tracking. I think I just heard Mr. Webb say October the 5th would be the joint meeting with the board. So would it be appropriate? So, well, first I have a question. Is it fair to say that the soil work could be back? You're doing it on August 22nd, a rough give or take. Is that a 2-week process to get that back, 3-week process? I'm just trying to understand, Mr. Shapiro. So if we have that information back, that could be good information to have when they sit down for the workshop in September, and then you'll have that information, assuming that can be done. So can that be done before the September 14th workshop?
So I think generally, as I understand it, there's sort of two prongs to soil testing. There is, as you say, sort of the lab test component, the perk rates of the various samples will need to be evaluated. I may not have down to the umpteenth, 0th point the perk rate, but the soil scientist I retained is very experienced and indicated that he, using visual clues once he gets on the site, is going to be able to tell me that morning basically, every component of the existing system is totally screwed and you're going to need to totally reconceptualize this thing, or we can save this tank or what have you, and this is the viable area for the septic system. So I will not, in the interest of always under promising and over delivering to you, I will not have a fully designed septic system at that point, but I will have probably on Monday a high degree of confidence in sort of the general principles that the to-be designed system will follow and its general parameters.
So, Mr. Shapiro, normally a soil scientist or even the health department, they'll look at a primary and reserve. So will they at least, we're not the design of the system, but will they be able to at least identify your primary and reserve areas of the drain field?
I think so, yes, sir.
Okay. I don't know if that would make the planning commission feel a little more comfortable, but at least if they know your primary and reserve areas, they can get an idea of the layout that and what that will serve.
Yeah,
I'm looking for a concept plan,
Yeah.
not drips, how many gallons, whatever, a concept plan that it works in the area. That's what I'm speaking of. And Mr. Weekly, I'll add one thing about the contract. The contract has been signed and approved by the Board of Supervisors, looked at by the county attorney, and we are a recommending body. We look at the contract, we can make no changes to that, so I don't see the point of looking at the contract because he has done that with the Board of Supervisors, and we have no say at this point.
Well, I'd still like to see the contract.
Yeah.
I just
Personal-
circulated that to
personal,
Mr. Carpenter and to Mr. Webb to pass that along to all planning commissioners.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
Mike.
So you had spoke about redoing the flood zone line.
Yes, sir.
Are you're still looking into that?
Yeah, yes, sir.
So-
Progress continues.
My question to that is, how does that affect the neighbors at all? Is that just, are they just gonna redraw what you're looking for? Is this to redraw the line on your property, or will they redraw the line to neighbor's property?
So, I don't see anyone that I've talked to in my strolls around Kriglersville in attendance, but if there's anyone I missed, I'd love to meet you.
I'm here.
He's here.
Hi there. Great to meet you. So it may end up affecting the flood line on the neighbor's property. Again, hard to say for sure, but I'm just sort of generally thinking. My sense is that the floodplain was drawn very conservatively by FEMA, I think based off the 1980s model. And so there's likely a potential reduction in the space that is covered by the floodplain on some of my neighbor's property. But it seems basically we're arguing that the floodplain should be much, much smaller than it is. So anything that would be encompassed in the new floodplain, I think very likely is already in the floodplain. We might freeze some folks up and get.
I started to say it sounds like it might benefit the neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's a complaint.
Any other question for Mr.
The
Shapiro?
gentleman.
Well, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
We'll have public comment in just a minute. Yes, thank you. Any other question from the planning commission? All right, thank you. Now, any public comment from the public? Yes, sir.
My experience is from living there 86 years.
To identify himself.
The floodplain is-
Yes.
I'm set to go.
Yeah, would you,
It's pretty much accurate.
yeah, could you identify yourself and maybe if we could get somebody to take you a microphone? Thank you.
I'm Sidney Coach. I live adjacent to this area. My observation in the number of flash floods and the major flood of 42, the floodplain is pretty accurate. I don't know how you would go about changing it with the acreage of watershed, the degree of slopes, and the amount of rainfall that we have yearly. I'm interested to know how you would go about doing this. Also, we seem like we're getting a little heavy on event venues. Is there a provision in this contract that if this business is not successful, that this doesn't wind up being a low income rental units or something of that effect?
Okay, yeah, ordinarily we don't try to respond to questions, but if you'd like to, that would.
Well, sure. I'll just say very quickly. I think that, well, I certainly understand there are substantial rain events in the area. Part of it is in order to escape, the flood zone is supposed to reflect, I believe, the 100-year flood boundary. Many of the flood events we've seen have actually, according to river gauge data, been 500+ year flood events. So I'm certainly not arguing that there is never a circumstance where water, runs the banks of the river. I would merely argue that they are, according to the probabilistic weather models, few and far between, and thusly the redrawing of the flood boundary would allow our property and hopefully our neighbor's properties to better qualify for federally subsidized flood insurance. That's sort of the long, boring technical answer. I'm sure my engineer could give a much longer, probably more boring one. Finally, I think this zoning is sort of the parameters on what we can and cannot do. I can't say everything we can do by right with the M1 zoning, but I can tell you we have expressed our intention for the property the best of our ability and as holistically as possible. And I have no intention of seeing this business fail. If it does, I will be in quite a predicament. So.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? All right. If not, thank you, Mr. Shapiro, and we will move forward. Okay, again, this is something that we've been working on for some time, so we'll try to move through this quickly. Mr. Ahmed Helmi has applied for a special use permit to operate an event venue on A1 agriculture zone parcels. In the A1 zoning district, an event venue use is allowable by special use permit and required to adhere to Articles 14-18 through 14.18.4 of the zoning ordinance. The applicant is seeking a special use permit to allow an entire 38.6 acre parcel and a roughly 20 acre portion of adjoining parcel to be utilized for the following uses: up to 70 individual short-term rental units consisting of a mixture of cabins and glamping units, a single structure containing a lodge, restaurant, and wellness center, a maintenance/housekeeping building, and an employee housing building. The applicant has proffered a conceptual site layout/design and eliminated large-scale outdoor events as an allowable use. The 38.6 acre parcel does not have a postal address, but is located on Ford Shop Road, Route 618, roughly 1,325 feet from the intersection of Ford Shop Road and Beamtown Road, Route 632. The adjoining 20 acre portion of a parcel has a postal address of 638 Ford Shop Road, Culpeper, Virginia. The parcels are identified on Madison County's tax maps as 42-19 and 42-19D. Okay, Ligon, we have seen this sometimes before. Is there any additional?
It's a blown up site plan.
Yes.
I was having problems with my printer and I figured it all out. So we're golden, and just sort of like the last Quicklersville rezoning. Of course, this is a special use permit, but you'll see a letter. Mr. Helmi is moving forward with an evaluation of the soils, and that's going to happen on September 1st. He's going to all, I guess, 5 of the park. Now there looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 park areas. He's going to lease, I think that letter states, and at least my conversations with Mr. Helmi, he's out of the country right now, but he's going to try to park at least one site on each of those 6 different areas that he's identified as drain fields. So that will give us a lot more information. And of course, I have not had an opportunity, but conditions will, again, look similar to what's at Crickersville. This is an event venue, but just keep in mind, there's no outside events. So it's not going to be inviting people for a concert or something. That's not what this is. This is strictly the glamping proposal. Just off the top of my head, I will send VDOT an inquiry, just basically saying that we do have this. We're expecting this to move forward beginning of October for a public hearing, and any comments they've had. But traditionally, I'll just use Crestway as an example. They will put, we want an engineer to design the entrance with the understanding that, widening this road, turn lane would probably be a requirement. So I will send that through. I think from our hearings we did, with the applicant, this is obviously a proposal that I think I could say that, a lot of people in the general area probably aren't super thrilled about. But again, public notices will go out beginning middle of September. So for the 21st, the folks who live adjoining, and of course that's quite a few people, will have gotten notice about this. So we can expect probably at the 21st to really sort of have a first run public hearing before the actual joint hearing in October. And my concern with this proposal has always been the density. I think when we talked to them a few months ago, it was, acquire additional land, and maybe that'd be sort of a solution. He has acquired more land. I do generally like the layout. When I did see it, I sort of felt more comfortable, just me personally, looking at it than when it was 38 acres. So I think it's improved in that sense. But I've been very clear to Mr. Helmy, it's still a dense project, and whether or not it will ever build out to this in the near future remains to be seen. But I still think that the density is sort of the key sticking point with this proposal.
Okay, at this point, Ligon, he has agreed to non-discharge for waste water.
Yes, I mean that will be a condition, and very much like with the Crickersville, this could be even if he does go out and do 5 perk sites, and says that's great, he still won't totally know that it will support. I mean, I think he'll have a good idea, but he still won't totally know that it will support if this is proposed as presented. He won't know until he gets and really starts, perking for every, for all the capacity that he's shown here. So, but that as a condition, if it doesn't even have to be a condition, but we will make it a condition. If you're only going to have the density of the number of units that the septic will support. So a clear condition will be, if this is approved, you come back with your site plan. When a site plan comes back, then we'll expect kind of all the perking, all that stuff will have been done. And he says, look, I can only get my first phase. I can only do, 15 units here. So, I mean, again, we don't know. I suspect the soils here are probably pretty good. And I think he'll probably get a decent report back, but we'll see that after September 1.
Okay, any question for Ligon?
Ligon, I got a question, and I've asked the gentleman a couple of times, and he hasn't replied one way or the other. Maybe he's replied to you. The guy that's trying to get this approved, if it passes and it is approved, does he intend on selling it, or is he going to build this out like he's telling us he's going to?
Yes. Maybe. Yes or no. I don't know. What he's described to me is sometimes, and he's done several of these, sometimes whoever develops it is a different individual party. He sells it to them. I know the one in Shenandoah County he sold. And sometimes he's part of the development group. Sometimes he's not. From my perspective, as long as we have those conditions in place, the ownership, if that's something that gives you pause that the person presenting it is not going to maybe potentially develop, that's fair enough. To me, from a planning perspective, it doesn't really matter as long as those conditions are written to whoever it may be passed on to, they're going to have to follow. It's not going to change what's being presented, but if that's a sticking point for you, I mean, so be it. I understand, but I don't know if he'll be involved or not involved. But I mean, again, in Shenandoah County, you can go online and read about that. I mean, that was something that he sold after he got the approval, and that's a lot of developers. That's sort of the model they work on. They do all the horizontal development, and I guess you would say, and all the land planning and approvals, and then whoever builds, it goes up. Sometimes a different person, so it's not unusual. Whether you like that or not, it's kind of up to you.
I think he pretty much answered that first night.
Mhm.
He said that he planned on selling it. I remember him saying that.
I remember too. Exactly.
He pretty much said that.
That exactly
I mean, I
right.
think he said it. He did pretty much say it.
That's his business model. Yeah, that's what Faye
That's the
said.
way they do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the part that bothers me, if that's the way they do it, this guy can stand up here and tell us all kinds of stuff, and the guy that buys it, even though we've got a picture in mind of what it's gonna be like, it doesn't mean that guy that buys it is gonna follow that picture. I mean, he's gonna stick to the rules because he has to, but not present the same picture that the guy that's presenting it to us now.
Yeah, another thing I noticed here, I think this is different from the most recent time that we saw this. He's mixed in cabins among the glamping units now, and we don't have any, he was telling us something about so many 2 people clamping tents and so many 4 people clamping tents, and now he's got cabins in here as well, and we don't have any clear picture of what those are going to be either.
Yeah, we'll have a clear picture before
Okay.
21st
So
for sure.
he's still got a lot of groundwork to lay.
Right,
here
we've got a lot to do between now and 21st.
Any other question? Yes, Faye.
Okay, so getting back to refreshing our memory so we don't get confused. Mr. Helmy is the one we've been talking with, presenting the developer up to this point. A special use permit will be issued to him. And then how will that work going forward when someone else buys it? What's going to be the path of that?
Well, the special use permit in the application would be that it would run with the land. It's sort of like with Crest Array that ran with the land. Now we do, I think, we have the ability to say, no, we don't want it to run with the land. You want to run with the applicant. Now, in this case, that probably would be a deal breaker. It would be a deal breaker. So, but I mean, is it possible in talking to them and again, being around folks like Mr. Helmy, who's an experienced developer, is it possible he could be in on the development side? It's possible, but it's also possible we never see him again. So
basically what you're saying is it needs to be locked up tight before we even consider this.
yeah, I think that if the conditions are acceptable, then in my opinion, it doesn't, if I was in your position, I can see the apprehension, but I think the conditions, as long as you're comfortable with the conditions, then that's probably the most important thing. If you're inclined to even approve.
Any other question for Ligon? All right, the applicant is not here tonight, I don't think.
Yeah, he wasn't going to be.
Wasn't here, okay. Therefore, any public comment on this? Okay, I guess that tells us what the public comment's going to be on. All right, next one is item E. Loth Callan Renewables LLC has applied to rezone a 91-acre A1 agriculture zone parcel to M1 Industrial to develop a solar farm in the M1 zoning district. A solar farm is allowable by special use permit. Solar farms are required to adhere to Articles 14-19.1, commercial solar energy facilities, through 14-19-3 of the county zoning ordinance. If rezoned to M1, a subsequent public hearing for a special use permit will be entertained. The 91.8 acre or 91.9 acre, which is parcel is located on South Seminole Trail, US Route 29, but does not contain a postal address. The parcel adjoins where Yoder's Country Market is located. The subject parcel is identified on Madison County's tax map as 48-12C. I guess we'll start with that one since the subsequent one is a special use permit.
Yeah, so
there are some changes I notice here.
Right. So this would be a rezoning and a special use permit for determine is allowable. Other communities do it. So it would technically be 2 hearings. I know we've talked about this project on and off for, well, a little over a year easily. I think the big question that always sort of, why it wasn't moved forward was simply the fact that, the applicant need to have an agreement with REC. That appears to be in place. I didn't read it all, but online, I think the REC agreement study is there for all to see. As I've said with solar, I've always found solar to be a fairly straightforward proposal. I think most of the, I would say, sort of criticism has been mostly visual, but that's not to mean that there isn't some issues with stormwater and the physical layout and access. There are, but there are, engineer plans have to be submitted for stormwater and whatnot. We would get a site plan. We did in the last year, we did reduce the buffering from 300 to 100 feet. And I'm just, this sort of sketch that's been shown, there's so much space have to be off the creek. There's so much they have to be off the property lines, which I think are adequate. That's shown on the site plan. It doesn't, I can't totally tell that it has a 100-foot setback, but it would have to have a 100-foot setback. My feeling, and I've always said this, people talk about solar panels here in the county, is that my sort of pulse, and I might be wrong, is that there could be a tolerance for several smaller scale solar projects. 2 or 3. We know there's a limiting factor that have to be around the substations. So I think if this is something, once we get to this point, and again, they're looking at November 5th. If we do get to this point, I think we need to be very clear to all others that might be interested. If the sentiment is that a couple, maybe smaller scale projects or something that they're interested in, again, if you are inclined to approve this, I just recommend approval, but for the board, there is a couple taxation schemes, I'll say. One is just a machinery and tools tax, which is any kind of machinery or tools, you assess a value, it depreciates over the course of the asset's life. Another possibility is the revenue sharing, which is a set annual payment on top of property taxes for each kilowatt hour. I think it's kilowatt or megawatt. Yeah, like kilowatt, megawatt. I don't know. Electricity is not my greatest, but megawatt. So this is a roughly 16. Right. I did talk to the Commissioner of Revenue tonight and have to refresh our memories, but I thought we believed that the revenue sharing, if we were to move forward with this, was the better of the two proposals. That's something in the next couple of months we can analyze. Another big part of this is a siting agreement, which I have a couple examples of siting agreements, and they're very detailed. We go into decommissioning, just about everything you can think of regarding the development, the potential undevelopment decommissioning of these sites. So that's something that hopefully by September, if we look at this again in the next workshop, that I can have before you. So but again, I know we've talked about this. We anticipated it would come back, and again with November 5th being a target date for a hearing, we do have time to contemplate this and to get those sort of other siting agreements and revenue sharing things before you, so you can make the best decision.
Okay, let me go ahead and start off here. I see several things we need some clarification on. This overlay showing the panel arrangements, they're saying, what, 70% of the 91 acres being used? This looks more like a 95%. Is that an accurate overlay, or is that just something they slapped on there with the computer? They haven't actually done a engineering plan for where they're putting the panels, have they?
We actually have a senior project engineer from Luke Allen who can tell you all about this now that it's got the.
Okay, I'll defer my question to that point then. Okay. My second point, and I don't think this is new, but they're showing, if I'm reading this legend correctly, the landscaping screening only along the front of the property. Are they assuming that the neighbors' trees are going to provide the screening for the remainder of the boundary? Which, well, that's why I'm asking the question. It's if we're going to have it screened, I understand the screening from 29, but that makes obvious sense. But I'm not sure it's reasonable for us to expect the neighbors' trees to do the screening on the rest of the boundaries. They don't necessarily need to leave those trees. Also, I see the access road opening on 29 there. Is that correct?
It's already there.
Is that, I understood that there's the access road goes in by Yoder's Market. Is
Yes.
that correct?
I think the access road is right across it, the crossover in front of
Well, there's,
Route 29.
yeah, that's the farm access road that exists there now.
Correct.
The problem is that if I understand correctly, that's not the access road that's permitted on that property. Is that correct?
So there's like a farm access road on 29. I was sort of always under the impression, maybe Mr. Beal, you can talk to this, that would utilize, I guess there is an easement through Yoder's. I mean, obviously for servicing, and there are some trucks that have to get in and out. That's my impression that would be used, at least from previous conversations. So maybe you can speak to that.
Farm access road is right there at that cut.
Right.
Cut through. That's really, I think, they were contemplating using that.
Okay, well, that's why we're having, we can talk about that tonight.
Yeah, and the question was raised.
Right.
Now we need to answer that question, yes. Okay, those are the points I wanted to bring up at first. Any other questions from the Planning Commission?
Yeah, what was the duration of this project? Well, I mean, not to build out, but from
The lifespan?
the lifespan of the project,
20 to 25 years.
20 to 25. There's no.
All right, well, I guess we're going to move on to the applicant's responses then. Would you please identify yourself and
My name is Melody Callender. I'm a senior developmental engineer from Luth Callan. Actually, if you would pull up that slide. this is a little bit outdated. So I brought a new layout for you all to look at, which I think would address some of those questions of the 95% versus what is we're actually starting to see. So I just finished this the other day. And again, I know you're talking about screening. We're open to screening as much area as everyone deems is needed. So if anybody has an issue, we have no problem screening all around the whole entire site if we really need to. So we want everybody to be happy as far as that's concerned. The impetus was to use that existing access. And, you know, again, we're open to that as well, to amending to some other location. We're also, if you want to talk about the actual access of the site itself, that can move as well. I mean, we're not set in stone that this is exactly the way it has to be designed. And we welcome any direction that you would like to give if there's issues that we can address through moving of components and parts of the array.
Ligon, could you explain to us how we got from the contractor that was last pushing this to this new contractor?
This is the same contractor we had last year.
This is the same contractor?
Yes, sir.
I don't recognize that name, though.
Not the first one.
No, it's not the first one. First one was,
A year ago it was different. This is
no, a
the
year
first
ago
one.
it was Luke Callan. Luke Callan, who's we had from the beginning.
In August of last year, it was not that. It was somebody else. Was it not?
Yeah,
Megan?
right. That was a
No,
company.
it was us. I've been working on the project
We
since
didn't
then.
like their contract, so we went with Luke Callan. That's how we got it.
And where is this new contractor located? Where?
Connecticut.
Connecticut? And can we look you up on the web and
Yes, sir.
find out where you have other facilities?
We do a lot in the Northeast. We have a large presence in New Mexico. I actually work for the company and I live in Northern Indiana. I'm a farm girl from Northern Indiana, so. But yes, you can look us up on the web. And it's LuthCallenRenewables.com.
And Ligon, how does the size of this proposed project compare to the size of the previous proposed project?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same.
It's the
Yep.
same.
Is this now based on your contract with Rappahannock Electric for what that substation can handle?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that was one of the things, we got a feasibility study from them. It's based on this size. So we cannot go any larger than this. We can always go smaller. That's usually a utility standard.
That's the maximum capacity
That's
of
the
that
maximum
substation.
capacity that we have identified.
And do you have a contractual relationship with
Rappahannock.
Rappahannock Electric?
We're working on that. And we're working, well, I mean, we have to sign the agreements to go back.
Because
go back
that,
and forth
the
and-
last time that we went through this,
That was pinned.
I had understood there's some question as to whether Rappahannock Electric wanted this.
That's why we had to wait till we got the feasibility study.
Okay.
We got that in
Yeah.
July. We were just unable to go ahead with the rezoning because it was too much of a financial risk. In case the feasibility study came back where it wasn't feasible.
Correct.
We got that in July, it's very feasible, so we're going to go back with it.
And I believe, Mr. Webb, I think you have a copy of that facility study?
Yes, it's online. So it's I did put it it's attached. So I do have a copy of that, and it's again, anybody can open that up under other under the meeting.
Okay, it's under
agenda.
tonight's meeting on the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I said it in the email that I sent out.
Yeah.
That would be.
So how did the lines get to the substation?
They will run back down 29 to 230, along 230 to Fairground Road at the substation.
So did we above ground lines?
Yes. The other option was to go up 29 and then kind of around the school zone area and then down, all the way down further north.
So you're going, excuse me, you're going to have to follow an existing line there, or are you going to follow
It'll be,
The roads.
it would be right, we would be in the right of way. So we would be using right of way easement on those roads to get to the substation.
Using your own lines, using their
Well,
existing lines or?
no, it's gonna be a full new line that gets put in for this specific project.
This is above ground.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right.
We
pay for it, but the line is paid by us.
Yes.
Yeah. It would be helpful for us if we could kind of see
What that's gonna look like.
what that's going to look like, yes. Yeah.
I can supply that,
Yeah.
Mr. Webb.
And are these panels movable or are they fixed?
They're fixed.
Fixed.
The nature of this site
And
is,
in which direction?
due south. The nature of this site lends itself better to a fixed panel. You can't get the density that you need with a tracker system, which is literally one straight row, and they follow the sun. We can't get the density that we need or we would like for the project with that type of setup, because it's limited to, technically, it's called a string side, so it's a string of those panels together that get plugged into.
What's the height of the proposed panels?
The tallest portion would be a little bit less than 10 feet,
How
10 feet.
10 feet?
The top of, so if you have the panels, you're looking at them, you've got one mono post in the ground, and then you've got a tilt of two modules, one stacked on top of the other with about an inch in between. And those would be about 25-degree tilt, so it literally ends up being about that. That is. And it just sits there.
Does any portion of this land touch Fairground Road?
No.
Hey, did you have a question?
I do have a question. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
A couple of questions, just curiosity more than anything else, because I helped to develop this ordinance, so I'm definitely very interested. And I don't know how many of the rest of you have visited solar facilities, but I have. And I have pictures. And I would go again, and I might go to others.
I'd be happy to take them.
Absolutely, I'm sure. And I went to a much larger one, and they were movable, and it was a very positive experience. And I would urge you to do that. If you're worried about noise, if you're worried about anything like that, you need to go. Of course, not being noise here, or even the hum, was very interesting to know when that happened. And when the movable ones moved, there was no noise to speak of at all. We were standing almost next to one.
Yeah.
So, and when the sun went in, they stopped humming. It was very interesting. And I learned a great deal of information from the people that were guiding our tour. But I noticed the first one that you all proposed was like 10 megawatts, and now we're up to 16. Was that, I'm just curious about how that was able to be increased.
Would you identify yourself, please, when you respond? Okay, do you have a microphone we can take?
I think I do, yeah.
Okay.
So the reason for that is the original people weren't willing to spend any money to put in a new line.
Mhm.
And the line that REC has would only take as much as 10 megawatts a year. These people are willing to put that new line in.
Great. Good.
What's the voltage on this line that you're?
34.5, so that's the lowest
Okay,
low
so,
distribution voltage that.
all right, yeah, so it's under the 150 kV. Okay.
Oh, very much so.
Any other question for either? Okay, thank you.
Will the electricity go to Madison County residents?
Yes, ma'am. I'll explain that a little bit. As a distribution project, that means it's a local level project. We are going into the fairground substation. So the energy that goes into the fairground substation gets distributed throughout the community. And that's literally where our point of interconnection with the utility will be, is at that substation. So it's not, the electrons go someplace else. They'll stay right here in the community.
Any other questions from the planning commission? Okay, so I guess for future reference, we would like to have maybe some idea of what your transmission lines are going to look like. You said there's existing right-of-ways there that you would be using.
Typically, there are existing right-of-ways on most any road that's out there. But yes,
Okay.
that's what we would be using.
Another thing I think we might like to see would be a visual of a panel and maybe some idea of the spacing, how much space is between them, how much open space is going to be left, things like that.
I can tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you, I mean, I just did this
Good.
design this past week. So there's 16.1 feet from edge to edge.
Mhm.
There are a few aisleways that tend to be about 30 feet. That's typically how I like to design them. So it's easy to traverse. So if you look at the top section, there's one you can see kind of coming straight down. And then there's one that kind of transects off of the road,
Mhm.
the proposed access road. Those are all 30 feet. But the aisleways in between are about 16 feet. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I do have another.
Yes. go ahead.
Considering how long we've had solar facilities of this size around, and more development, more and more improvement in what you're doing, size of panels, et cetera, and if you read on the internet some things from 25 years ago, you're going to read horror in a way if you go to the wrong places. I mean, let's just get it out there. We're all guilty of maybe that at some point, and we certainly talk to a lot of people who do that. But having done a lot of this research, it's better and better. It's more and more reliable. It's and the standard, industry standard for the way you cite this is a standard. Just like when you build anything else, you have certain things you have to do, given.
We follow all applicable
Absolutely.
laws. We follow, I build to NEC 2017, which is Virginia Electrical Code. Everything that I design is designed to that code. We have to, our intention is to make sure that we have a stormwater prevention plan in place, designed for you all to look at for the November meeting. If we need to have any additional, we can do that. All those intentions are there, and also having a civil design in place at that time as well.
One other question, a big issue was the last time we dealt with this was the recyclability of these panels in 20 some years or however long it lasts. That would probably be a really good thing to address for this community. And the other thing, we had facilities that I visited were very big, over 150 acres, and they were huge. And one of the concerns was, what if a panel breaks? What if a bird flies into one? What if a meteor falls from the sky? And how do they know that? And we just need to allay some of these fears.
Sure.
I know the answers, but you can tell.
A couple of different things. Panels are designed and tested by Underwriter Laboratories, and there are specific statutes that govern panels from underwriters, and those are required by the states. A lot of utilities require that you use components that are listed by Underwriters Laboratory when you build. I've never done a project, and I've been doing this for about 6 years. I've never done a project that I've not used panels that were already approved and governed by Underwriters Laboratories. So they go through a heavy test period. You're talking about hail damage. I mean, they do hail tests on those. I mean, I put a 8 megawatt array in the middle of Kansas, and it gets hailed on all the time, and it's fine. But there are also string level monitoring. So that's the small level, a small minute level. So that's to the panel, and they're able to tell you with that type of monitoring if you have a bad panel. We need to change out a panel. And then that gets recycled. There are some specific solar panel recyclers that are really starting to come into the industry. And that's going to be a new and up and coming industry to make sure that once everything starts coming of age in 20 to 25 years, that it's going to be recycled when it actually gets to the end of its life.
Following up on Faye's question, yeah, Peter, go ahead.
I guess I got two things. One is we just seen the power company put in a new transmission line out toward Powell Hearth because they have electric outages from time to time. As the county grows, and it will, whether we want it to or not, what will this do to help offset our need for power? Or will it?
It will. It should. Your community, this is about the perfect size of project for the size of your community. You know, I personally, as an engineer, don't think that you should stick with one specific type of power. I think that, you know, having the solar is good. What solar tends to be used for is issues with the grid. You'll see frequency issues with the grid, which means there's the sine wave, for lack of a better term. You know, it's the Greek part of electricity. It gets you get really close waves and then you get really far apart waves. What this does is it'll help smooth that out, gives you better power, gets rid of issues with the utility has with what's called dirty power. And that's when you get a lot of power outages, or you get someone that has issues with their equipment that gets, it'll ping the equipment and the equipment will shut down. But dirty power tends to have fluctuations in voltage to the point where it's out of tolerance. So if you've got 12,470 volts, which is a smaller voltage, and you have about a 10% window up or down, so you've got 5 up and 5 down. And a lot of times this will help keep that voltage because it's usually, it doesn't have a huge fluctuation in that voltage swing. So what it does is it'll help smooth out other issues that are in the grid in that 10% to keep it from flopping out of tolerance and then causing issues to equipment. Yes, sir.
One other question. With all the new Green Deal money that's coming down the pike, is there money that's bonds or whatever can be put up for this, or money put into this to help this project?
As pertains
Grants.
to grants and stuff, not necessarily grants. I mean, there's tax credits that get applied to this. I mean, you can look it up. They just passed a new one where it goes back, ITC goes back from 26% to 30%. And there are some new provisions that not just solar, but battery storage and whatnot, they can see up to 50% renewable tax credit. And that's, I mean, for a .org, you can't recognize that, but that's why developers do what they do. So, we'll see.
So most of these panels are going to follow the contour of the land as it is now.
Yes, sir.
So as you're driving northbound on 29, they're going to be positioned in the direction that you're showing it now.
Yes, sir.
Pretty much. So when you go by, you're just going to see row after row after row, and no glare or anything coming from any of the panels.
No, you won't see any glare on 29 from this because they literally are facing due south. So you're going at an angle that you shouldn't see any glare, number one. And number two, the screening should be thick enough. There should be 2 rows of screening there that you really won't even know it's there until you get to the road and there's going to be a small opening and then you keep going.
Mr. Chairman, I do have 2 questions. And I guess this is going to end up being more for Faye than anybody. But years ago, Faye, we defined a utility corridor. and that utility corridor was for the purpose of transmission, as I recall. So if this qualifies as transmission, I think we're outside of a utility corridor. And I'll be quite honest, my heart just sank when we're talking about bringing lines out in front of Yoder's and down 29 and then down 230, as opposed to going, I mean, you've got about this much land between this property and Fairground Road. Have the Tanners been approached to go back that way? That's just a question I'm throwing out. It's not meant to, take up a bunch of time tonight, but I do want the utility corridor thing looked at to see what this entails, if you would.
I asked the question about the 150 kV. That's the lower limit on the utility.
Because we've already got, going down 231, the old Blankenbaker Farm, you've got those massive poles going from there over to Sheets and then going up towards Wolftown. So that's part of the corridor, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Okay. We know what those poles look like.
Yeah,
Are
we
you
do.
aware of those?
Yeah, it's not gonna be a high voltage pole. It's not gonna be super tall pole. It would be wood poles. This is only a 34.5 kV line, so you can see that driving down almost any road in rural America. It's not gonna be something that's super ostentatious and large. It's not gonna be like a 90-foot pole. We're not transmitting that large of a voltage, so a regular wood pole is probably what it's gonna be.
okay, thank you.
Are these you said are using existing Rappahannock right-of-ways?
No.
No.
Right away.
New
Creating
poles.
new right-of-ways?
We haven't gotten that finalized yet, so
Okay.
I don't want to tell you one way and it end up being another.
Okay.
That is another thing that we have to work out with Rappahannock.
So possibly you could go up on their poles.
Probably not. They don't. They tend to not like you to use their poles because obviously they're going to be putting the poles in. It's not something they won't let us do that. They won't let us do the work at the substation. They're going to be doing that work. They would be putting the poles in. We would just have to work with them and then a specialty engineer for the route itself.
Now, who will maintain the line that's going to be installed on those poles?
They will.
They will.
The they in that is REC?
That right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
So they will take it from the solar panels all the way to the substation.
Yes, sir. We pay for that. Where we transfer power is called the POI, or the point of interconnection, and that's at the array.
Right.
If you look at the top, the very last, those 6 white boxes at the top, the very bottom one, that's gonna be the transfer of power with Rappahannock. If we go that route.
Could I say one thing? No.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing about the corridor that was established some years ago, at which I was absent that night, and you were too, Danny. I think, when it was passed.
Girl, you remember all the way
Because it was
back.
very sensitive. It was a sensitive thing for me, and I couldn't be there to vote. Anyway, and I remember you were on a trip. But that was not, I don't think the discussion before that was never a consideration about whether or not that would ever accommodate power from a solar facility. That was for a different reason.
It's not applicable here anyway.
No, it's not at all. I mean, I don't think we're going to have we shouldn't have a conflict.
Right. Yeah, that was the point. That was for the 150 kV
Yes.
or above
Yes.
transmission.
Right.
line.
That's all. Right.
Rappahannock Electric doesn't even really consider this voltage a true transmission line, do they?
No.
distribution.
They don't like to
No,
talk
it
about it,
doesn't.
no.
69 kV or
Yeah,
higher
right.
typically is when they start.
Right.
So this
calling
is
it
Just want to
essentially,
clarify that
yeah,
that
this
was
is no
not-
different from any of their other distribution lines.
Yeah, if we did it as a transmission project, we wouldn't be working with Rappahannock. We'd be
Right.
working with whoever your ISO is, which I believe is PJM.
Yeah, right, that's correct.
Right. Okay, good.
Any other questions? One point, we always get the questions about environmental damage, pollution, et cetera. I noticed these are monocrystalline modules.
Yes, sir.
Maybe it would be helpful if you just real briefly explain what's the likelihood of those shattering and dissolving in rainwater.
The module type that most everybody has worry about is called a thin film module. It's got cadmium in it, and it's called CadTel.
Mhm.
That's the one you got to worry about. These as monocrystalline, I've seen, and I'm not kidding. Like I said, I'm a farm girl from Indiana. I put stuff on an interstate and had a truck driver fall asleep and drive through part of the modules. They're not going to leach into anything. It's not going to cause EMF to occur, which is electromagnetic frequency. You get more electromagnetic frequency from your cell phone up against your ear than you would this. There's really not much noise. I went over and looked at the substation today. There's noise at the substation. That it's not going to be that noisy. But those transformers that are there are 115 kV transformers. We're only talking about having two 34 kV transformers. And it's going to be quiet. You're not going to stand there and say, I hear a bunch of stuff. You don't at all. And we would be using string level inverters, which would be dispersed throughout the array. So there's really not a huge print of any type of sound that anybody is going to hear from this thing.
Yeah, I noticed in your specs that they are fan cooled, but I assume that's a relatively quiet situation.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, a string inverter is about that wide.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you probably hear a car makes more noise than it would.
Any other questions or comments or?
I would just make a comment, a compliment to you. You're so much more helpful in understanding this than the representative of the prior company who was not.
It's a
Thank you,
different,
sir.
an engineer from a salesman. It's a little different.
You're right.
Yeah, I deal in reality, so I'm not gonna, I'll be honest and say I come from a line of salespeople, but I never wanted to do that. I just, I'm engineer mentality. I'll tell you what's possible and I'll tell you what's not possible.
Nathan, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's probably sounds a lot more attractive to go the shortcut through the woods to the substation as opposed to looping down around
I know.
the school. I don't know who owns that land. Is it Sierra Tanner? Is that kind of indicating?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the Tanner's on that.
I'm sure it's probably more appealing to go underground than above ground.
It's more costly to go.
Well, appealing to us,
Yeah,
not you guys.
I totally understand
Me,
that. I
again,
get it.
sorry. So just so you guys know, if you were going off the backside underground, nobody will probably say anything about it. If you're going above ground around the school, you're going to have more comments on that.
Any other question? I'm sure we will have more later, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any? Okay, any public comments? Please come identify yourself and
Alan normally talks, so I'm Erin Nichols. So
Yeah.
So we own the property that is to the south here, so the lovely trees that Mr. Carpenter was referring to, those are on our property line. So while most of our conversations in the last year about this and our concerns have been based around zoning, and Alan will talk about that, I did have some questions about the solar in general. So the panels themselves, just an individual panel, what you said the height is going to be about 20. Tell me again, like the actual dimensions of a panel, if you wouldn't mind.
Just wanted to make sure it was on. So each panel is typically about 4 foot by 8 foot now.
And there's going to be
2 stack.
And how many panels are going to be on this property?
About 36,000.
So 36,000 panels, and you said the coverage area of that parcel is what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head what the coverage area is. I'm sorry.
And so I think that's going to be obviously very important because we've been talking about the coverage area specifically. So you said you guys are based out of Connecticut. How many of these have you done in the state of Virginia that we could get in the car like that and go and see?
This would be our first Virginia project. We have a couple others in development as well.
Awesome. Where's the closest one to us?
I know that we've done some stuff in New Jersey, I think, and they've done a lot of Massachusetts. I think Rhode Island, they've done a couple projects at Delaware, Connecticut. Yeah, a lot of
Delaware's like the closest if we wanted to
Probably.
road trip it out.
Yeah, if you would, please, we would prefer if you address the planning commission, and the comments are meant to be your statements. I mean, we entertain questions and we will try to find information, but
Okay.
that's the way this is supposed to be.
Thank you, I'm sorry. I appreciate you explaining that. And thank you for entertaining my questions. So I guess for the commission as a resident and obviously bordering resident, my questions have to do with the solar panels, but also that company. So the, place that's closest is Delaware. So, I mean, obviously I'm ready for a road trip. I think we'll check it out. To Faye's point, we've done a lot of looking. And while, yes, there's a lot of bad stuff out there, that's maybe not relevant for the solar conversation, I would encourage the commission to go ahead and look at what's going on down in Louisa, if you're unfamiliar. If you want to talk about decommissioning, less than a month ago, the LA Times wrote an incredible article because they were on the forefront of solar panels and all of the problems that they're having with decommission. So, Ligon, when you go ahead and put together what that looks like, I would really want the commission to go ahead and look at what it looks like 20 years from now, and making sure that we are safeguarded. And then I would also want to go ahead and ask a company that is going to be in my literal backyard, how many OSHA violations that they've had. You can look that up. I can look that up. You might be surprised how recent those are, how many those are, how much those are. So I think it's important as a resident, not only that's bordering this, but in general in Madison, who we do business with. I think, Faye, you talked about that with the applicant. He's putting it in, he's trying to do the right thing. I think it's important, if that's a litmus test for you, that you make sure that the company that you are granting this potential special use permit and rezoning to light industrial in my backyard is somebody who is worthy of doing that, who has a good reputation, how long they've been in business for. They're going to go ahead and give you a 20-year bond. Have they been in business for even 20 years? So those are questions that, just on a business level, on a resident level, I would hope that the commission is pondering, asking. I know that we have really beaten the dead horse about solar over the last year. I know you all are sick of it. Trust me, Al and I are sick of it. Our children were talking about solar panels at dinner tonight. They are so sick of it. It is a very hard moment, and I know that there are a lot of hard feelings. But the last thing that I'll leave you with, besides the fact that the zoning is really the thing that gives Alan and I the most heartburn, is that I ask you as a planning commission what you ask of residents here in Madison County. I manage $500 million worth of real estate up and down the East Coast. I have for 15 plus years. I read your beautiful comprehensive plan before we ever looked at buying a house, looked at buying a property. Just by show of hands, I am going to say, how many of you have read that comprehensive plan? Maybe one? Two? You know what I mean? So I feel like I did my due diligence. Alan pulled the GIS for every property that we looked at buying, looked at who our neighbors were, and looked at what things were zoned. Because we live in a world where we know the implications of this. We know it far more personally than anybody else. And I am a fan of Providence, and I do not think that this particular project landed in our literal backyard, but for anything else but the fact that we know by day to day, everything that we do, what we get paid to do, tells us that this has significant and severe implications for us personally, but also for the county that we picked to live in, that we pay taxes in, that we volunteer in, that our children go to school in, and that we work. So that's my comment to the commission. Again, thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you.
May I make a comment before you sit down, please? That's very impressive. Since you'll be doing this research, why not write a memo, submit it to Ligon, and he can distribute it to all of us?
I'm happy to do that if you'd like me to do that. I am cognizant of the fact, sir, that there are a lot of pieces of paper that come in a packet, and that, we always end up being the last one, I feel like, on these meetings, unfortunately. But if that is helpful for us to go ahead and really put that into writing in what we have relentlessly looked at in regards to solar and rezoning over the last year, and every mental down moment that we have had as a family, I will be more than happy to do that.
And I assume that it will include all the research you'll do on this company, and
I am very happy to point you in the right direction in those items that I referenced. Yes.
that would be helpful to me. I don't know about the rest of the people.
If it's helpful for you, I will do it.
Yes. Thank you. We will look at it. Yes, thank
I
you.
appreciate that. And it's
Yes,
tag
please.
Alan for zoning.
Identify yourself and go to it.
We started this one and we got a little bit down the rabbit hole here in the details of the solar project, when what the topic was here was the rezoning tonight. It's going to be the premises, because without the rezoning, the rest of it doesn't really matter. But I have two major points that I want to make on the rezoning. And my first one is that, we all know the purpose of why we have zoning laws. We're not one of these states where you can just do whatever, wherever. Your rights are not without limit on what you can do on your property, which is why we have to make an appeal to do something different. And the reason why we're doing that is we want complementary uses in all of our county planning. Mr. Elliott said it, Mr. Cowan, who said it well when he said, if I open my retail shop here, I don't necessarily want my many stores next to it, because it's not a complementary use. We don't want things side by side that aren't going to help each other grow and thrive to the best of our ability. The Commonwealth of Virginia addresses this very clearly in their ordinance Article 7, and I've got the statute if we need it. But the purpose of the zoning ordinance is, and it's just a sentence or two, I'm going to read it here really quick, a portion of it. I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing. But zoning ordinances shall be for the general purpose of promoting the health, safety, or general welfare to the public. And Section 8 says, in particular, to provide for the preservation of agricultural and forestal lands and other lands of significance for the protection of the natural environment. That's what the Commonwealth has to say about it. Now, Madison, our zoning ordinance for M1, and right there at the top in the statement of intent, it says that the M1 zoning will not adversely affect any contiguous district. So it's been proposed to take this parcel and turn it into M1. The contiguous district, the one next door to this house, is R1. It's residential. It allows for homes on as small as 1.5 acres in this current junction. We have the potential to put a lot of homes there if we want to.
Mhm.
So we know now that it's not a complementary use. We try to avoid putting industrial properties next to residential properties, however few or however many that there are, because it provides an adverse impact to those properties and a diminution of value. It does not preserve agricultural land, as those stated in the Commonwealth intention for their zoning, or in our other goals that we have. And so, I mean, for the benefit of, one family and one company, we're going to provide a lot of adverse impact to the neighbors, not just myself, but the other neighbors around us. See the property an awful lot from up on O'Neill's Road. And to that point, on some of the legal aspects of the zoning changes, I think it's important that we talk about some of the things the Virginia Supreme Court has done over the last 90 days. It's important that we bring these things to our attention here. As we challenge zoning, especially for non-complementary uses like we're proposing here, there's two tests that the Supreme Court considers when contesting these things. First test is that, the person complaining about it, that's me, must own or occupy real property adjacent to or in close proximity to the subject. I should note that I own and occupy it. We live there. The folks that want to make the change here do not live there. It's just an investment, as it were. And also, but the second test here is to allege facts demonstrating a particularized harm to a personal or property right or imposition of a burden different from that suffered by the general public. The general public doesn't have, your house, let's say, may not have an adverse impact to its property value. Yours may not, but mine does. I can complain about it, and the Supreme Court will listen to my argument on the basis that I am directly impacted on this based on the change of zoning that's not a complementary use. And there's two cases going on. The first was decided on May 26th of this year. It's Anders Larson Trust versus the Board of Supervisors, and I believe this one's Fairfax. And the court held that the alleged loss of value can constitute an interest distinct from that of the general public. And they're ruling on overturning that zoning right now. The second case is Seymour versus Roanoke County Board of Supervisors, which held a similar, finding that the court held that the decreases in value on their property were harms not suffered by the public generally, and satisfied that part 2 of that means to file a complaint. And they're ready to decide that one as well. And those folks making those complaints are likely to be successful in overturning the zoning based on that. So our board of supervisors here, who you're going to recommend how they should vote based on all this back and forth that we have here, despite all, they do a lot of wonderful work here in the county, but one of their primary duties is adopting and enforcing the county's comprehensive land use plans. And I've said this before, and it really brings me to my second point, is that we get lost in the weeds in these things. We're talking about how close everything is and where the entrances are and power lines. And the reason why we have the comprehensive plan is that when we get things that are very large projects, very technical, and all that, we get to take a step back and look at the big picture and say, does this really make sense? We can get in the weeds all we want to, but do we really want to tackle this as a whole and make those decisions up front? So that way, when we come to make these points now, we make these decisions, we have guidelines in place in order to do that we can refer to know that whatever our personal opinions may be on things, no matter how much we like, green energy, and it makes us give us a warm and fuzzy, we can rely on these, these initiatives that we've put forward here to guide our thoughts, our opinions in the best interest of the county, because we've already defined those things. So I'm going to read you a quick portion of our vision statement because I think it's very relevant to what we're doing. As residents of Madison County, we value and wish to preserve the county's scenic beauty, rural environment, farms and forests. The goals and implementation strategies presented in this comprehensive plan are designed to enable the county to realize this vision. Is this project realizing that vision? Are we preserving scenic beauty with power poles and big metal girders that are holding these things? Do people come to Yoder's to go visit there, to go and see farms and fields and forests, or do they come to see a wall of Leland cypress blocking out the solar project that's there? Our objectives that we put forward in the comprehensive plan, these are the things that are supposed to be our goals, what we're working towards. Major strategies for doing that. Our objective is to prevent disruption of land use activities and scenic qualities of Madison County. Those are the words that we wrote. That's what we want to do. And our strategies for achieving those objectives that are relevant to the project at hand are number 7, minimize conflicts with developing uses, taking care to preserve prime real estate needed for local community development. What a great spot that would be for a school in the future. What about our Route 29 business plan that we like a whole lot because it's, as Mr. Elliott said, we're going to grow whether we like it or not. It's coming. So where are we going to put this stuff? We're going to put it there where it's a complementary use and we can bring retail next to retail, like Mr. Callan suggested. And we can bring our tourists in here. Mr. Shapiro's bring us lots of people here with his new business. And we're going to, let's say, all these tourists have somewhere to shop and go. Well, we planned that. We made the plan. We know where these things should go. And if you look at the map in the comprehensive plan, that's not where your industrial goes. That all goes to the north if you want to put it somewhere. Number 9 on our major strategies here for achieving our objectives is to minimize encroachment upon residential neighborhoods, establish communities, villages, schools, parks, and conservation areas when siting expansion. Well, you got the park right across the street there, the Hoover Ridge, that we love and is developing wonderfully and is going to be a huge draw to the community. You got residential neighborhoods, let's say along the south. Some of our teachers are there, they're wonderful. We've established our communities. The school's right there. Fairgrounds next door. You're looking at this as it's a solar project, but you're changing the zoning to industrial if you do this. You got to look further than the 20 years this thing's going to sit here. You're going to have a spot that's industrial zoning, and what's going to go there next? This is short-sighted planning if we do this, because if we do this, it's going to sit there for 20 years. Then it's going to become dilapidated, like all these projects do. You're going to have a hard time finding people to recycle these things because it's very hard to get the stuff out of it. It's going to sit there. And then you're going to end up with another industry or something that may not be as polite of a neighbor as your solar farm sitting there. You got to think further out in the 20 years that this thing's going to be good for. So your goals and implementations in your comprehensive plan say to promote tourism or tourist-related enterprises, attractions and events, and aggressively market Madison County as an attractive place to visit. Well, we love the Yoder's place over there. It's wonderful. Does this help make it an attractive place to visit? I bet if you put other businesses up along the Highway 29 corridor there, is this going to help make them attractive? It goes straight up the hill across the street. I don't care how tall your trees grow, it's not going to hide this place. I feel like we've got to talk about another thing too, while we're talking about the solar stuff here. Has anybody read the House bill that went through Virginia, Bill 206? Anybody? Well, you all should, because it directly relates to small-scale renewable energy projects in the Commonwealth. It passed with bipartisan support and went to the Senate unanimously. And it regulates all these things that go in over 10 acres. We're starting to realize now that these things are coming along, what a problem they are, both in rainwater runoff. Ask Louisa how that's going for them. And we can bring some of those folks up here if you like when you come to our public hearing, and we can hear all about it. I bet it'll be an earful for all of us. I hope we don't have to do that, but I'm sure that they'll come. And, additionally, decommissioning concerns are huge. Read the LA Times article. I never read that stuff, but I found it, and it's from only a few weeks ago. And all the stuff, that's a large portion of it, we like to say that it goes to recycling because it gives us a warm and fuzzy. We go, oh, green energy and recycling. But the reality is, a lot of this stuff, a lot of it's going into landfill. Then what happens if these projects are abandoned? You get mailbox money for a while. These things are loosely maintained and paid, and then what's to keep you from walking away from it? Or selling it to the next guy who feels like they're not bound to the same agreements, and they come in here and they go, well, there's a problem here. Now it's dilapidated, and we need the county help to fix it so we can beautify things and meet these goals. We could have just stopped this from the start. I'm not against solar per se, but this is a terrible place for it. And the change of zoning to industrial right here south of town is terrible. So we've established that the proposed changes in zoning violate the intent of the zoning laws and goes against what our stated goals and objectives are as outlined in the county comprehensive plan. So if you don't care what the law has to say about it, we've already said what we want to do as a county, what we want to be as a county. If you vote for it, you don't care about the legal intent of the law, and you don't care about what we want as a county either, you know? So I don't know what it is that would drive, the vote for this, but it certainly doesn't follow the guidelines of the legal change in zoning or what we want as a county. But you would think that if we were going to go against both of those things, we're going to go against the intent of the zoning laws and the way they're written, and we're going to go against what the county plan was, that there'd be some benefit to the county as a whole. There's not. There's no benefit to the county as a whole. We're not getting a discount on our electric bill. We're not making it any cheaper to live in. I'm not saying that we should, but it's not there. No employment there. No one's getting a paycheck from this place. No one's coming in. All we're doing is depreciating, diminishing the value of the homes along the side there and preventing future development of our corridor in the same spot and across the street. And you're taking spot away that could go for other uses that would actually benefit the county later. Whether you like solar or not, the industrial zoning does not belong there. That's all I have for you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, thank you then. If not, let's move on. Oh, yes, we've got more. Not a lot more. Okay. Of course, we know that our comprehensive plan update and review is coming up. It appears that the Board of Supervisors may be willing to provide us some resources to help us with that. And Ligon has been kind of the point of contact and liaison on this. So Ligon, would you kind of introduce this potential Planning District 9 help from this?
So I know and we'll try to make this a quick conversation. We've been here for a while. So I know when you did it in 2008, you broke down the different committees and took parts and were involved with goals and objectives, and that's still the case. But I am proposing, one is working with the planning district and having a planner from the planning district sort of be the consultant that I would work with between the planning commission, the consultant, and myself. The basic format would be to give you a timeline, and I'll present, I think maybe at the next, maybe the September 7th meeting, I can present a very clear sort of outline, timeline showing that, in the fall, working with the consultant, Ms. Little from the Planning District Commission, we could work on doing those kind of background information, working on demographics and the things that are, just really just kind of the background work, getting that information, looking at growth trends, looking at building permits, population, et cetera, working on that in the fall. Parallel to that process, at some point, maybe later in the fall, we would work to identify sort of the plan elements. In the current plan, you have goals and objectives that are sort of in one spot, and then you have appendices, which also sort of have some goals and strategies in them. So my thought is to come with one consolidated sort of, here are the 5 or 6 things from housing to environment to ag or whatever these, and there's some things that are required by the state and housing. Here are the 5 or 6 broad categories that need to be addressed in the plan. And then have the commission work with the planner, Ms. Little, and myself to develop goals and strategies under those specific topics. Now, I'm going to think there are going to be 5 or 6 different topics that will be sort of, we need to develop goals and strategies. So talking to Mr. Carpenter, maybe possibly we can divide the plan. I don't think we can do it all at our regular meetings. I think maybe divide the plan commission to 2 sort of groups, that this group takes these plan elements, 3 or 4 things, other one takes these 2 or 3 things, and we work on them with the planner independently to develop those sort of plan elements. And then we all come together, maybe beginning of 2023, once we've worked through this, and we're all sort of in agreement with the plan elements and the basic goals and objectives, then have maybe some sort of community work session, do something at the fire hall where we have people come and can look at different maps, growth, potential preservation area, different planning topics that can be addressed, that we could have people come and give us public comment. Then when we do that, kind of get back into those goals and strategies, present that to the Board of Supervisors, probably late spring. And of course, this can all be extended, as we work. There's not a hard end date by any means, but looking at probably summer, a year from now, roughly finishing the process for the update. I know that's real quick, but what I can do is September 7th, maybe even have Ms. Little join us, maybe even remotely, to kind of maybe go over this process. It's always good when you have the board in the plan commission in the same room. We can again sort of follow this process. I guess the big difference is if we do divide the plan commission to 2 groups to work on the plan elements, is that again we would have sort of breakout meetings to really work on what those, and invite the public. Obviously, the general public would be invited to those meetings as well, headed toward at some point having some kind of community work session where we really could get input. This also could be a survey in there that we could do, but that's the quick 6-7 minute lecture. I think we had a meeting the other day with the Plain District, and that was sort of the consensus I think we came to as a group. That would be maybe a good process. So my idea is not necessarily giving the Plan Commission, hey, look, take it home and come back, but hey, look, let's look at this. This is what, these are some ideas to think about. Do you want to add to them? Do you want to take away? And we just sort of go back and forth with our consultant in kind of a more traditional consultant client sort of process that a lot of comprehensive plans are developed. Yes. Any questions?
I want to make a comment.
Okay. So essentially, we're looking at a resource that we didn't have last time, and the potential of maybe modernizing the format and streamlining it somewhat.
Yeah, heavy visuals. I think it's an important part of comprehensive plan is just kind of show examples, show different scenarios. I even talked about maybe how, if there is commercial development, how do we maybe want that to look like on 29? I talk about things like signs and monument signs and landscaping, that we could actually have visuals that kind of are maybe show, so just text. So yeah, a little different format.
Hey, you have
I just want to say again, yes, having worked on the last one intently a lot, we all did, all the ones that were on the commission at that time. And we had a lot of assignments, and we did do a lot of work. We did a lot of interviews. We polled a lot of people. We did a lot of surveys. And we came up with the best plan that we thought we could at that time, 5 years ago now. So I think it's really important, considering how I've heard tonight and how I hear many other times, we use a comprehensive plan to our advantage, and we use a comprehensive plan against ourselves sometimes. And we hear it commented about. And I understand how the legal document is, what kind of legal document it is. I just want to say that I want to be sure that all of us, the commission, such as Mr. Work mentioned earlier, that we get to the meat of it, which is what are our objectives today in 2022, having come through what we just went through economically, with COVID, with everything else that's happened. We can't even define things right now because they're so different than what they used to be when we had a textbook lesson on, I'll bring the ugly word, recession, for instance. I mean, it's all over the place, not matching up. Bottom line is we need to look at ourselves again. Whoever knew we would have the kind of growth in homes, in building, in businesses, and whatever that we would have today in Madison County, because we are being squeezed north and south. And we need to look at things. I'm looking at them much differently. Last time it was pretty easy. We were just a nice little cozy bedroom community that nobody cared much about except to come visit. It's not like that anymore. So I don't want us to go so far down this rabbit hole. It's not going to be a rabbit hole, of course, Mr. Work, but I agree with him. We don't need to let it go so far that we don't have input, the kind of input that we want. So make sure that does happen, that we get to say, and that it gets represented the way we as a commission, as best we can, identify what we have, which,
Okay. To that end, if looking at the time, I'd ask that everybody look at the first three goals, if you would, and the procedure that it looks like we may be using is we will forward information like that, things that we want to change or things that we need to add to Ligon as our liaison, which will then pass on to the resource, the planner that we're hopefully employing. So in interest of time, if anyone has anything on those first three goals, and hopefully there are some things, because there are things that need to be changed on there. If you'll email me, I'll collate them and collect them and forward them to Ligon. Okay, any question about or problem with that? Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll get something when we're all together as a group. September 7th, we'll have something kind of in writing that can.
And by then we'll have determined for sure whether this is going forward that way.
Right. Yeah, and just for Faye's point, Planning Commission is very involved. Public will be very involved. Just a little different process in the term of using the consultant and the strengths that she has to help us.
Okay. Question,
Make a
yes.
point right quick. And this is just an opinion. You know, we talk about splitting in half and half work on this and half work on that. Well, if you get more than three people together, you got to advertise it. So, if we got to advertise it, why wouldn't the whole commission work together? So I know what you're doing and you know what I'm doing.
Yeah, we thought about that. We just thought, well, right now we're just so busy with just doing the regular business that, you know, if that was, unless we want to do an additional meeting.
I don't.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a time management thing. Plus, I mean, Ligon isn't specifically saying that, but before anything is anywhere near finalized, it has to come before all of us anyway. So it's just a slight variation on what we did before. Instead of a couple committees doing this, a couple people doing that.
We all have input.
Yeah.
Before it's too late.
Yeah. And I think that's hopefully going forward, that's what we'll be doing. In fact, the first input we'll be giving them, I mean, we already gave them some input at the agenda meeting when we talked about this earlier this week. It will be what I get from everybody about those first three goals and potential changes that we need to make. And we'll go forward from there. Okay. Any other comment on that? Okay. Any additional items from the Planning Commission or public? We hope not.
One more thing again.
Okay.
Where are we on the ordinance? For instance, the private road ordinance that I'd like to see get off the books. I am reading different things than what we proposed. And I thought it was going to the board with our proposal and it was changed or something of the sort. I'm not sure how that worked and I'm not real happy with not understanding it. I just want to know.
Yeah, so we're going to have on the September 7th meeting, actually in the advertisement, we're going to sit down and talk about those three things. It was the short-term rentals, the ADUs, and the private roads. That'll be on the agenda, and I'll make sure whatever comes in the packet is, what, there was a few things that I should have taken out one thing, and then there's, one question about in the ADU, there's, I think there was a question about, I'm sorry, whether it's
person
owner
living there.
occupied,
The person-
but everyone's aware of everyone's opinions and all that on that. So
Okay,
yeah,
okay, just so we
nothing,
keep
nothing's
that
been
up
hidden
there.
there. So,
It
but I'll
was
make
a-
sure that whatever is proposed, we put in the packet for the 7th is what at least the plan commission.
Yeah, it was agreed that whatever documents are presented at that meeting will be okay or
Yeah, I'll send them out.
reviewed by
Yeah.
the
Okay.
chairman of the committees and by
Yeah,
the-
I just don't like, it seems things are,
Yeah,
I don't like
that
that
was-
idea at all.
that was discussed,
'Cause I'm
yes.
very willing to be a part of everything.
Yeah,
So at
we're-
least on the 7th, we'll all be in the same room. We can make it a collective decision of how they can move forward.
Yeah, and that was one reason we had Brian here tonight to try and give us some information on that. Okay, any other? Okay, 3 hours is enough. Do I have a motion to to adjourn? Motion made, second? Okay, lots of seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Steve, one
Yes.
thing. Mentioned before that